If I could call the study commission meeting of May 12th to order, please. And Ms. Cohn, we did. He's excused. Present. Excused. Right. Let's have our Pledge of Allegiance and prayer, please. Okay, public comment on any item on the agenda.
Auditor Banner of 2601 Grand Avenue. Reference item 12. My question is, do you really want public input? The Council of Commissioners put public comment on any item not on the agenda at the end of their agenda to discourage the public from commenting. And it seems that you're doing quite well doing the same. I do not see any instructions, any invitation on your website encouraging the public to present communications or to participate in your meetings. And FYI, I'm hard of hearing, but I can't hear nothing back here. There used to be a speaker up here so the audience could hear what was going on up here, but we can't hear a thing. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, were there any questions for Mr. Banderob or? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. We appreciate your comment. Okay, moving to item 5, approval of minutes of the meeting held May 5th, 2025. Cormac?
Thank you, Chair. I just, when I went to open the attachment that was the presentation on the community neighborhoods, it said empty folder. I don't know if anybody else had that problem. And okay, and then I did notice the minute copy that I had review, check comments in red. Yes. So those need to be accepted and updated. I've been having problems with that, yes. Okay.
Ms. Shaw?
This is really cute, Cam. You're gonna like this one. On page 5 of the minutes, let's see, on public comment in item 12, it should say he found that anything that intersects with Park Street, you said insects.
I can't hear you.
It should, on page 5. I'm on, I think. I am. Yeah, that's okay. Anyway, on page 5, in the public comment, item 12, third line down, he found that anything that intersects, it should say, with Park Street or Montana, and he had insects. Kind of cute. You're making sure I read these. Okay, it was funny. I got a laugh out of it. Anyway, and if there's no other, I would make a motion to approve the minutes as written. Okay, thanks.
Were there any other adjustments noted or needed? Okay, Ms. Shaw has made a motion. May I have a second, please? All those in favor? Any opposed? So we've approved our minutes. Thank you, folks. All right, so the next is conversations with the departments. And so up first is Lynette Hogart from Animal Services. Ms. Hogart, thank you for being here tonight, and we will go round robin. You were provided the questions, and I will start with Ms. McCormick to my right with question 1, if we could.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hogart, for being here tonight. And I'm going to ask our first question, and it is, what are the specific responsibilities and duties of the Butte-Silver Animal Services Director?
Okay, well, first, I'm not Animal Services Director. My title is actually, I'm the Animal Services Manager. And my responsibilities are to manage the operations and activities of the Butte-Silver Animal Shelter and Animal Control. I develop goals, plans, and measurements for the identification and evaluation of the animal shelter's needs and services. I prepare budget and monitor division expenditures. I direct, supervise, advise, motivate, counsel, train, prioritize, evaluate the work and performance of all personnel. I hire and recommend discipline and for all the personnel. I coordinate and determine the needs for repair work to be performed by outside counsel or contractors, excuse me. I coordinate division activities with those in other divisions and departments as situations require. I administer department and division policies. I evaluate division requirements, recommend purchase of new equipment and supplies, prepare and review specifications for recommended purchases. I prepare division budget estimates and other regular and special reports. I supervise the development and maintenance of the animal shelter costs and other records. I supervise the development and maintenance of the animal shelter costs and other records there. Requisition division supplies, materials, and equipment as needed. Meet and greet the public and answer questions regarding animal shelter operations, policies, and refers questions to other appropriate personnel. I also handle the social media most of the time for both animal control and the animal shelter, along with the website. I attend meetings, conferences, and workshops as requested and authorized, and prepare reports for Council of Commissioners, perform special projects for the Chief Executive. I'm responsible to plan, prepare, and participate with the Animal Services Board. I'm responsible for fundraising. I participate in all department union negotiations. I have 3 unions. And I prepare and schedule, make the schedules for all of my workers, and it's a 24-hour, 365 situation down at the animal shelter. Not that they're there for 24 hours, but the animals are, so that's all.
Excellent. Are there follow-up questions? Mrs. Dolan?
I bet you missed me last week, Madam Chair. Thank you, Lynette, for coming, or Ms. Hogart, thank you for coming. Could you tell us what who the 3 unions are that you work with?
We have the Teamsters, which are the animal control officers. The laborers are our animal shelter attendants. And we have the clerks union for the administrative professional. Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, so Ms. Shaw, number 2, please.
Hi.
You again. I just have to say that this gal is busy, and she does a great job. And when I first started on council, we had like over 100 dogs and I don't know how many cats, and they report every month what it's down to, and it's just it's a fraction of what it used to be of a wonderful adoption program. Just had to give her a little kudos on that sort of thing.
I
But here-
appreciate that. That's due to my staff, not me.
Well,
So-
now but you're the manager, so
thank you.
you know what rolls uphill. So my question for you here is, what are the most critical problems presently, if there are any, confronting the Animal Services Department?
I believe that our biggest and most critical problem facing the animal shelter or animal services is staffing. And by that, I mean Back in 2020, we hired our third animal control officer. That's fantastic. It helped us get a lot more animals off the street. We did not hire any more help at the animal shelter. As I said before, we work there 365 days a year. Holidays, everything. We have, our biggest criticism, I would say, is that you never answer the phone. Nobody ever answers the phone down there. Well, the reason we don't answer the phone down there is that any given time, we only have 2 full-time employees working in a day, and we do have now 1 part-time employee that's been there almost a year and a half to clean, feed, medicate, get animals ready to go to the vet, intake animals if animal control brings them in. There's a lot to do in the morning, so we don't have time. Then in the afternoon, when they take their hour lunch break, come back, they don't have to feed and clean necessarily, but they have to do all of those other things and meet the public, try and get dogs adopted, cats adopted, meet them and greet them with their families, other animals, along with try to reclaim animals to their owners, go through adoption applications, make sure that they have their orders inventory ready, so if they need to get something to me, I can get it ordered for them. There's just an awful lot to do. Answer phone calls, answer the messages, input data into the computer, answer emails. There's a lot to do. I feel like if we had even 1 more full-time staff member, we would be able to accomplish a lot more in any given day. On Saturdays, we have 3 full-time employees, but it's a busier day even then, so plus they have to try and interact and find out how the dogs and cats are behaving to try and tell you if it's going to be a good match for your family. You know, we have a lot to do to try and make sure that you're going to be safe. If it's good, you know, if it's a good animal, should we transfer it? Is it, you know, there's a lot more to, you know, animals being in the shelter than just, hey, it's a cute animal, just take it home with you. We try and really make sure that it's going to be a good match and what kind of home it should go into. You know.
Follow-up questions? Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, thank you. Lynette, thanks for being here. So your part-time employee, they half-time, three-quarter time, what are they?
She works part-time, 20 hours a week. She also sometimes covers as needed on vacations. Bless you. One of my frustrations, I guess I'll say, is that if somebody calls off sick, during the weekdays, it's not a problem. I often just will run over and fill in. But on the weekends, on Sundays particularly, there's only 2 staff members on Sundays. If somebody calls off sick, I'm the one that goes in and fills in. Because it's a short, you can't really ask. I don't feel it's right to call up the part-time person on such short notice and say, hey, you need to go to the shelter and work today. She's already put in her hours and to give her such short notice, so I'm usually the one that fills in.
With that, so if you were to hire another, make that half-time person full-time, you could probably use a half-time person again too, correct?
If I were to hire another person, what I would, my idea would be, what my preference would be, to keep the part-time person that I have as she is, hire another full-time person, and that person I would like to be strictly office so that she could man the phones, deal with the public every minute, because our doors are locked from 8 to 1 every day. And so I want it, especially when phase 2 of our remodel is done, I want it to be a much more welcoming place. I want people to be able to come in, ask questions. They aren't going to be able to meet the dogs or cats at that time, but I want them to be able to talk to somebody in person. And they can do a lot of the paperwork, bookwork, answering the phones, getting the adoption applications, that kind of thing done, reclaiming the dogs, getting the vet schedule set up. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that they can take off the plates of our other workers, and then they can work with the animals, get them taken care of, work with their personalities and evaluate them. That's what I would like to see happen.
Okay, question 3. Mr. Silk.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Hogart, for coming. Question number 3, what changes, if any, in governmental structure, organization, or powers would help the Animal Services Department address its most critical problems?
Well, thank you, Chad. I think one of the things that we are addressing right now, presently, is that we are doing a full-scale evaluation of our animal services ordinances. So many of them are very outdated. They don't meet the needs of our community right now. Our board, Animal Services Board, we have 2 members from that. Sean Peterson, our district, you know what I'm trying to say. Jeez Louise. Anyway, he's on a committee with us. Our Animal Services, Animal Control Officer, J.D. Santafer, he's the senior officer, and myself are really going through them with a fine-tooth comb. We've looked at other communities and what they're doing, what's working, what's not working for them. We're getting rid of anything that's really antiquated and not necessary. There's things on our ordinances right now where pay the treasurer, hold a bond, things that just we don't do and that aren't necessary. But then we really want to look at things that will give us a little more teeth and be able to hold people more accountable and just basically keep our community safer and keep our animal control officers able to just have a little more, I don't want to say control, but just give them a little bit more teeth, I guess, when they're out there dealing with the public. Things like barking dogs. The ordinance right now is really, it's not a good one. You have to get like 20 neighbors to sign a petition and they have to record it. It's just not a great ordinance. And so we want something that just allows a little more flexibility for people that really have a problem to be able to be served by us. Dangerous dogs are another issue. We don't want a dog to have to bite you before anything can be done. And that is how the ordinance reads right now. We want to just make things more cohesive and clear and work for our community that we live in now. The last time a lot of them were updated was 1982. And as you all know, things have changed a lot since 1982.
Follow-ups. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the idea that you're actually evaluating your ordinances is awesome, and I think every department honestly should do that. Of course, Matt would probably have to hire 2 more people to help, but they are outdated and they're vague, and I think that that's an awesome point.
Thank you. Our goal is to have them done by the end of the year, presented by the end of this year to council, and hopefully have them in effect by 26. That's our goal.
That's great.
So
the question does ask about, so we're the study commission and we're just going to make recommendations to the voting public, how if they might want to change our form of government or the charter. And you are in the charter. 20 years ago, I was part of the study commission that even made you a standalone department. I think that's worked great. But, do you have any thoughts about formal changes of government, like having a city manager versus a chief executive or changing the number of commissioners? What's your thoughts on that?
I don't really have a lot of thoughts on that. I am fairly new to government. I came from a foundation. What I do know is I think that things move a lot slower in the government than I ever thought was possible.
No.
It is. I've been here. I've been here for, it'll be 7 years at the end of 25, and I'm still surprised by how slow things move. Not, I think, through anybody's fault, because I think everybody wants things to move faster, but there's just a lot more steps to jump through. So maybe that can be something that is fixed. I don't see how, but I've only had pleasant experiences so far, so I don't feel like I'm in a position to really answer that, I guess.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to press you for an answer, Lynette.
Of course you are, Cindy.
Of course I am.
I could be playing pickleball right now. Dang it.
I know. But just to get your thought on, because we've asked every department head this question about the size of the commission, and I totally agree with the slowness of government. But 12 to, do you have a thought on keeping it the same or decreasing it? And you know that the commissioners are part-time, part-time to full-time. Do you have any thoughts on those particular
Well, I
things?
had a teenage daughter at one time, and I will tell you, I think that more is always harder to deal with than less. So I think probably fewer commissioners would maybe speed things up. In my opinion, it just takes less time to get things done when there are fewer opinions to garble things up, I guess, is how I would say it. More opinions, more problems, or more questions that need to be answered. So I always feel like if you pick a few people that, maybe have differing views, you might get somewhere a little quicker than if you have 12 people that have, that are all over the place. So that's my opinion. I would suggest probably my opinion is smaller, yeah. What that number is, I'll leave that to you guys.
Great. Any other questions for that? Okay, so moving on to number 4, Mr. Thielen, please.
Madam Chair, thank you. Lynette, what advice would you give the study commission in terms of conducting a comprehensive and impactful review of local government?
Well, I think that I'm not really qualified to give you guys advice. I have all I have with the Animal Services Department, but I do think that what you're all doing right now is the right thing to do. I think talking to each department head and listening to what they do and what their challenges are in their department. I think just honestly asking what each department does on the daily basis is really nice, to be able to get up here and tell you about my staff and what we do, what we deal with daily, and that you're listening to us. I think that is like the #1 thing you can do in this community to make a difference, really. Most people don't know what each of us do and what our employees do, and I don't think that that's a good idea. I think it's not fair to just assume you know what we do and what we deal with. So I think it's really great that you guys are talking to us, listening to us, taking in what we have to say, and I think that's the most important thing you can do. Mm-hmm.
Any follow-up questions? All right. Ms. Dolan, number 6, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So number 6 is, what challenges do you foresee for Butte-Silver Bow in the next 10 to 20 years? And does the current government structure position the city-county to meet those challenges? Oh, are we on 6 or 5? Oh, whoops. Sorry.
It wouldn't be an appropriate study commission meeting without me messing up the order of questions or whose turn it is at least once during the evening. So if we could back up to number 5, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so, Lynette. What inefficiencies could be addressed through changes to the local government structure?
So I took this question and I just applied it only to my department. And I think that what was inefficient in my department was when I was tied to the community enrichment department. And I think that was kind of taken care of when I was created my own, when it was created for it to be the standalone animal services department. It really allowed us to get things done quicker. We removed one part of that, and we've gotten a lot done in the 2 years, almost 2 years that we have been a standalone. We have completed phase 1 of our remodel. So now we have a really safe and beautiful kennel room for our dogs. And, we spent $180,000 of donated money, not taxpayer money, to complete that project. And that was like 6 years trying to get that done prior to it, and it got done really quick once we were allowed to just move with it. So I think that took a lot of inefficiency out of it. We didn't have to deal with a lot of, other people and their opinions that didn't really know what our department needed or, could use there. So I think that really took that out of it. We have phase 2 is to start any day now. That's going to make our animal shelter much friendlier, much more welcoming. We're doing the front part of our shelter's renovation. That's set to start any time now. Also, we have an ARPA grant, but we also have more donated money. People are just dying to give me money lately. I don't know. It's great. I mean, I don't want anybody to die, but, if you're gonna and you have money to leave. But it's just been, honestly, a real blessing that it's allowed the shelter that's been neglected. I'm going to say that it has been completely and totally neglected for many, many years. I will say I don't think, and maybe some people disagree with me, at one time I know that that some people were talking about a new shelter. That has been taken off of the plate since 2020 when we had COVID. That was the previous chief executive's idea, and it was taken off of the table because it just didn't make sense in the economy we have. And quite frankly, it does not make sense to me at all. I think where we're at, it's not the most beautiful location, I will say that, in the middle of a gravel pit, but it's centrally located. Nobody's mad when the dogs are barking. There's place for them to go, and with our new renovations that we're having, the building will be safe, and we don't need more room to house more animals. That's not efficient. That's not what we need. We're not going to save and help more animals by having more of them in our shelter. We want the amount that we can take care of at the time and get them out faster. If we get them out faster, then we can help more. Having more animals, you have more to choose from. They sit there longer and longer. So when you have more choices, they sit there and they wait longer. But we're also, phase 3 of our shelter remodel will happen late fall, or late summer, early fall, also donated money. And it's going to give us new sod, sprinkling system, and fencing for 7 new play yards. In our small, ugly little area up there, we're going to beautify it. We're getting painting. It's going to be really a nice place to come, and we want that. We want people to feel like they're welcome at the Butte-Silver Animal Shelter. So I think that'll take a lot of those inefficiencies and ugliness of our shelter right out of it. So.
All right, follow-up questions. Mr. Thielen.
Madam Chair. Thank you. Lynette, I want to kind of just go back a little bit. Since you guys have became your own department, it sounds like you've done really well. So is it your opinion that most of these departments should be standalone departments or continue bunched together?
I don't know how many actually are bunched together. I know only my department was put together with community enrichment, parking, weeds, and probably something else in there. I can't remember. I just slipped it all out of my head. But it was one director and an assistant director trying to oversee all of that, and I don't know how any one person could know what was happening or try and care about what was happening in my shelter, because I have to care about it all day, every day. And if you have that many other departments under your thumb, I don't know how you can, my head doesn't work that way. I can't multitask that many responsibilities. So I'm not saying other people can't, I just couldn't. And I think that my place works better when it's standalone. I report right to JP. I don't have to go through 100 hoops. I can make decisions quickly. It just works better for us, but I don't really know how many other are more than just one department, really. Yeah.
Ms. Hogarth, I have a follow-up question. You corrected us when you started your testimony tonight that you're a manager, not a director, and now we have you as an established department. So would you recommend that your title and possibly your compensation be changed to that of director?
Yes. No, I don't quite, I'm not 100% sure what the reason for me being a manager, not a director is. I think it has something to do with the ordinance. Maybe I'll change it. I'm just kidding. I don't really know. I think it does say in the ordinance when we were able to change it. I was acting before it was the standalone. I was not acting. I was the animal services coordinator. And when they moved it to a standalone department, I believe they were able to do that without having to jump through a bunch of hoops through council, because it said in the ordinance that it could, I believe it was at one time a standalone, and then it went under another department, and it could be put back per the chief executive and be ran as a standalone with the manager. I believe that's why. But
Okay, thank you for that. It does say in our section 7.07, the manager of this department shall be in
Correct.
charge of a department administration, so it might be charter language,
Yeah.
hence part of my question for clarification and just looking at responsibilities and lines of reporting. It seems that our department directors are the lines of reporting to our chief executive, and managers and others in those departments are reporting to a department director. But just wanted to hear your opinion about that and
Yeah.
what your understanding of things were, so thank you for that follow-up. Other follow-ups? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the idea of inefficiencies, I wanted to ask just what you have in your department with animal services with regard to like mutual aid with other counties. If you get a slew of new animals that you can't deal with because it's just a mass amount of I was just thinking about the husky situation a few years ago and,
we don't say husky.
oh, we don't?
The dogs that shall not be named.
Okay, dogs that shall not be named, sorry about that.
Just kidding.
But do you have agreements with other counties, and can you tell us about it?
I don't have agreements, Cindy, but thank you for that question. What I do have is when I started in the animal services coordinator job, I really didn't know, I will say, because I was assistant director at the Butte Central Foundation. We just asked for money and people gave it to us. I didn't really know about running an animal shelter or animal services. So I wanted to learn, and so I hooked up with, it's our animal shelter directors network. It consists of animal shelter professionals in Idaho, Alaska, Washington, Montana, and Wyoming. And so we have a call every other Friday, and we coordinate with each other. But I also went to visit a lot of these shelters in Montana, and we have a really great relationship and when we did the remodel last time, I had to unload a lot of dogs. We were full, and I had to do it quickly. And the only way we can do that is have people either adopt them or euthanize them. It's not something that I want to ever do or consider, so I reached out to my animal shelters that can take them, and we transferred out 28 dogs to other shelters. We're county ran, so we actually can't bring dogs in from other counties, but we do other things. We help transfer animals if we can. So there's a give and take that maybe isn't us taking animals from them, but there's a lot of other things that we do that give back. We reach out, we will get, if there's an unadoptable dog that we have that we don't think is moving here, we'll call another shelter and say, hey, this dog is not doing well in our shelter. Would you take it? Do you think you have somebody that can adopt it? And a lot of times the answer will be yes. And we'll drive it there, or sometimes they'll come and get it. I had a director come from Idaho one time. His kid was playing hockey in Missoula. He had a van, he had his 3 dogs. He had, 20 crates in his little van. He took 9 of our dogs. It was the most ridiculous, like, Jenga system I've ever seen. And I was like, are you sure? And he goes, shove them in there, we'll get them. It was terrible weather, and he took 9 of our dogs because we were full. So we really have a great relationship in Montana. We're very lucky. Nobody really says no, especially if you're in trouble and you're at the brink. They'll help you. We've sent them to Shoto. We've sent them pretty far. So it's really a good thing. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other follow-ups? Ms. Casey, number 6? Number 5?
Number 6. Thank you, Madam Chair. Lynette, what challenges do you foresee for the Butte-Silver Bow in the next 10 to 20 years, and does the current government structure position the city-county to meet those challenges effectively?
So this one is a tricky one. I think the biggest challenges facing animal services and animal sheltering right now are happening right now, and they will continue to happen and get worse in the next 10 to 20 years. Those issues are housing and veterinary care. Housing is an issue because many housing is not allowing animals, especially large animals, large dogs. Or if they do, they're charging a big fee. A lot of people can't afford it. And so what they're doing, and this is not just a Butte problem, a Butte-Silver Bowl problem, this is not just a Montana problem, this is an everywhere problem. They're surrendering their dogs to shelters, or they're dumping them, or they're abandoning them in the housing that they can't afford any longer. I think Butte-Silver Bow is doing a good job of trying to find housing that's attainable for people to live in, that they can get into, but they can't affect anything on what the property managers allow into that space, right? So they can get all this housing they want, but they can't say, you have to allow animals in. And it's a problem. Breeders are bringing puppies to us because they can't get rid of them. I mean, so it's not just it's becoming a luxury to have a dog or a cat even. We have more cats abandoned when people move or are evicted, left in apartments than we've ever seen before. Veterinary care is also a huge concern. Veterinary costs, I don't know if any of you have animals and have had to take your animal to the vet, but just the cost of vaccinations alone and the visit has probably increased by at least 50% in the last 5 years. One of the problems is there are not that many veterinary services in Butte. We have 4 vets, veterinary offices. Amherst has more vets in it than anyone. The other ones really only have 1 each. We no longer have emergency vet services in Butte. If something happens after hours to your pet, you are going to have to take it to Bozeman or maybe Helena. Animal control cannot help you. We don't have the ability to take care of your animal because we can't take it to Bozeman for you. It doesn't make fiscal sense for us to put our officers on the road in the middle of the night and have them drive to Bozeman and possibly get stuck with that bill. It's just not feasible for us as our department, and not something we're willing to risk with our officers, especially in winter. It's just, we would put them in our shelter and give them every care we could while they're there until the next day we could get them to a vet. It's not ideal, but it's not ideal for anybody. Veterinary care is everywhere. It's hard to get and it's expensive. And I think that people are having to surrender animals to us many times because they can't afford to take care of an animal, and when it gets a broken leg, swallows a toy and has to have surgery. And we've had several of those this year. Or even have it euthanized. When their dog is old and sick and they have to have it euthanized, oftentimes they can't afford it, especially if they're an older individual on a fixed income. It's $300-400 to get your dog euthanized anymore. Cats, probably $200. I think that's a big problem, and it's only going to load our shelters up, and then there's not enough people to adopt them, right? So it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Follow-up questions. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I probably should know this, but I don't. Is the Butte-Silver Bow Animal Shelter a no-kill facility?
We are animal control. So what that means, Cindy, is that we have a very, our rate of live outcomes to non-live outcomes puts us where we can say that we are very low kill, but we are animal control, so we have to euthanize, and we have to, if we got in the 20 dogs tomorrow, we would have to either make space for them one way or the other to hold those dogs that animal control had to bring in. If we were one call away from a hoarding case, as you probably heard in the news, there's many that have happened around us. 27 dogs in Lewis and Clark, 25 up in Flathead. Those dogs have to be held as evidence until that case is settled in our facility. So those dogs are property and they have to be cared for before the other ones. So if there were nowhere for them to go, we would have to make some real hard choices. And we only euthanize right now for if they're very ill, if it's better for them, or if they are a bite case, if they are a risk to danger, that kind of thing.
Other questions? All right, I will take number 7. So Ms. Hogart, what is the current rate of annual compensation for the Animal Services Department manager and members of your professional staff?
So
and then the second question, are these rates of compensation fair?
So, as I said before, I have the 3 unions. Animal control is Teamster. I have one officer. He was grandfathered in. This is why it's different. He makes $28.11 an hour. I have 2 officers that make $24.62 an hour. Our animal shelter attendants are in the laborers union, and there's 3 of them. And the part-time worker gets $17.98 an hour. And our administrative professional gets $26.92 an hour. She's a clerk 4. My pay is $67,465 a year. As far as the unions go, it's negotiated, so I think they get to decide what's fair for them as far as my position goes. Other people in my position make anywhere between 70 and 80,000.
Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's more of a comment than a question, an editorial one at that. I think you should be a director, and I think you should get compensated as a director for your standalone department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also know that you have volunteers, and I believe our community service with the younger people that get in trouble. I don't know if they still do that, but I just thought you might, if you can comment on your volunteer staff.
We have some volunteers. We don't get as many community service workers as we have in the past. We used to have Career Futures, which was super helpful to us, but as you know, that's gone away. Community service, not real reliable. We'll take them if they show up. I'm kind of tough on them because I cannot afford for somebody just to kind of flit in and flit out. We don't have time for nonsense. If you're going to come and do the work, you need to come and do the work because we can't keep training you over and over. It's a difficult enough job as it is, and you just can't, decide that you're going to show up one day and not the next. And we need dependable people. And so volunteers are super. We have a ton of dog walkers, which helps us tremendously. We can always use more. That helps us keep the dogs sane and keep them, happy and not going kennel crazy. That's great. But you can't depend on volunteers to do the job, right? Because they're volunteers, and there's hours and certain things that have to be done, and a volunteer doesn't have to be there every day. We have great ones that are. In fact, the part-time person that we hired, Laurel Crace, she's 76 years old. She didn't work for us. She volunteered for us for 13 solid years, every Sunday and Monday from 8 a.m. to noon. Very seldom missed a beat. And finally, when we had the part-time position, I said, would you just apply? Because this is crazy, and she did. So, we have volunteers like that, but not many, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, appreciate that.
All right, any other questions? All right. And yes, thank you so much for coming and sharing
you.
tonight, and a very important piece of our community. And those of us that love dogs and adopt them from shelters like myself are very appreciative of your work. So thank you.
I appreciate you guys taking the time to learn about us and hear what we have to say. So thank you so much for that. And come see us.
I'm not allowed because
take a couple
I bring
dogs
somebody
home.
else home.
We have a special going on. You take 2 dogs home, you get a cat or a kitten. Think about it.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, Government Buildings Department.
Hello there, John Sullivan, Government Buildings Manager, Government Buildings Manager.
Excellent. Thank you for coming to see us tonight. We appreciate you. You've kind of seen how this rolls, and we'll continue with the same order tonight if we could. So Ms. McCormick with number 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, John. I have your first question. What are the specific responsibilities and duties of the Butte-Silver Government Buildings Director?
So I do have the first paragraph from my job description, and it meanders. It just goes and goes and goes. Basically what it says is responsible for the management services and processes to support the fundamental business of the city-county government, manages plans and directs the day-to-day facility operations, and it goes on. There's, ground, sidewalks, maintain smooth operation, manage daily operations, varies by degree of responsibility and authority, focusing on excellent use of business practices, reducing cost of operation. The building manager plans, organizes, directs the activities, operations pertaining to all city, county-owned government facilities. So that's kind of, it's a catch-all. It does everything, and that's, without a doubt, there's a lot of that. And it continues to grow. It varies day to day and week to week and month to month. But realistically, the department is broke into 3 different sections. We have government buildings, which are all of the buildings. We have 59 physical facilities that are manned and operated, not including public works that we are called to do work. Then all the public works buildings, garages, parks, restrooms, gazebos, outbuildings, I guess I'd call them. As Chad would know, we have the 2 manned fire departments, and then we have the rest of the volunteer fire departments. And them calls vary, basically from function to function, I guess would be the right way of saying it. So that's the government buildings. We have the courthouse. That's kind of my main one. That's probably 30% of my budget. And then we have the Central Services Department. So that's 2 painters, an electrician, and a carpenter. And that is kind of, everybody pitches in to the kitty parts. But the main ones are government buildings, Parks and Rec, Road Department, and Public Works. And that kind of, it's the 860 account, and it can be anywhere from $500 a year to, I don't know, $50,000 a year contribution into that fund. I don't know if that answered the question. But
Yeah.
Follow-ups, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, John, I've seen you change light bulbs, so I know you do everything. And you have to know, you have to know how to do the things that your subordinates do, too, I'm sure.
That's correct, and that's part of the job description,
Yeah.
and building construction, OSHA, I mean, it's HVAC, mechanical, garage doors, man doors, automatic door openers, everything, yeah.
Boilers.
Boilers, air conditioning, yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. McCormick?
Thanks, John. I was just wondering, do you see many surplus buildings that are government buildings that Butte-Silver Bow could
I've got a
divest
list.
themselves of?
Yeah, I mean, that's my personal opinion, is that we have way too many structures, buildings on our inventory. I mean, maybe not way too many, but I think it's worth a serious consideration on what we have and what is needed and what is wanted. And I do touch on that further on down the way. I can go into it now, or I can answer it when we get to that question.
Probably we'll get to the
Okay.
question, if that's okay. Ms. Shaw, number 2.
Well, the most obvious is the age of our buildings. None of these buildings are self-healing or self-repairable. They're old and unique. So along them lines, I guess one of the bigger problems that I walked into, and I've got to tell you guys this, and I'll apologize up front, but I am brand new to government. I've been here 3.5 years now, and when Lynette says that this moves slow or painfully slow, oh my, it's like glacial slow. There's nothing even remotely fast about how this stuff works. So what I walked into is there's no cohesive or long-term plan or strategy for buildings. Basically, it is a free-for-all, I guess, is a lack of, or not a great way of putting it, but it's, You know, it's hard to come up with a plan. It's hard to plan a week. It's hard to plan a day. It's hard to plan an afternoon. You know, last Thursday, I thought that I would have all day today to work on this, and we had union negotiations. We had a tour of the Jacobs house. I mean, it just, you know, things that you think you can plan 48 hours or 2 work days in advance, it doesn't work. When I was saying, you know, the other thing is, so, and again, being new to it, I've worked for one chief executive, which is good, right? I mean, we have many, but the buildings manager works at the direction of the chief executive. And I don't know, again, new to the process, but these units that we were talking about, Cindy, were how many structures or how many buildings? It almost seems like there's a lot of pet projects and leases. You know, there's no clearly defined lease. There's no, you know, the muddier the waters are, the better the leases, I guess, you know, and it all depends on who is then managing the building in the lease, on what they want to ask for. And I can tell you that every time there's an increase in a lease rate, that the want list or the need list or the safety list increases proportionally. You know, I mean, it's like if I'm paying this much more money, then I want, you know, my pound of flesh. So that's a big one. And like everything else, I think you guys have probably heard this many times, is the administrative support, you know. So I have 16 employees, I think, that work under me, from housekeeping, cleaning, laborers, moving offices, electrician, 1.4, maintenance engineers for the mechanical stuff. You know, the phone, the emails come in. If you don't answer an email in whatever timely fashion somebody has, then the phone rings, and if you're on the phone and you can see it ring, then the cell phone rings, and then a follow-up email, and it's just the nature of the beast. It just kind of just stacks and stacks and stacks. So administrative support, if there's some type of, maybe in listening to Lynette speak or something, if there was some type of central dispatch or somebody that could answer phones and be that point person, that I think that would free up a ton of time. There's no board, there's nothing for government buildings. It's just a bunch of old buildings that, you know, you just got to prioritize on what the repair and maintenance, and then come up with a capital improvement list. I've been working with Angie Mulligan over at Public Works, and we've developed at least a 5-year plan. My concern there is, you know, most of these have been funded with COVID money. That ends at the end of this year, so I don't know how much, you know, I don't know where the funding is going to come from after that. I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm sure somebody does, I don't though, you know.
Follow-up questions. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Appreciate you being here tonight. I have a question with regard to the number of old buildings that you have to work on. Is it a case that it's just the list keeps growing, or is there, I know there is a very strong, and Mary knows this very well, with historic preservation. Can you elaborate on what the challenges are with regard to keeping, let's just say, Uptown Butte with the historic buildings, keeping that intact, but trying to keep them operable?
So yes, the number of buildings continues to grow. You know, I've been here 3.5 years, and we have picked up the Stoughton Park Complex, the Readiness Center, the old reserve station down there. There's 3 buildings there. We picked up the Roundhouse. We still have the Kelly Warehouse that was supposed to go away. You know, I mean, so the buildings continue to grow, or I guess our portfolio continues to grow, but, you know, the staffing and the monetary part of it doesn't seem to. The historic preservation, you know, it's not that big of a deal. Normally, well, I can't say that. Normally, when historic preservation's involved, there's grant money involved, and grants, I guess, is a really good way of getting money. I personally don't think it's a great way for maintenance, you know, for grants, and really it's what we have is a bunch of deferred maintenance. But grants are very paper heavy. You know, there's a lot of paperwork, documentation, follow-up reports. You know, even, you know, when you pick up a $10,000 grant to help a $50,000 repair, you know, there's somebody that has to do that work. You know, Shelley Cleverly used to do a lot. Kate McCord helps a ton. But there's a lot of administrative work that goes into grants.
Excellent. Other questions? All right. Moving on to number 3, Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sullivan, thanks for being here tonight. So question number 3, I'll go ahead and read it, but Ms. Shaw also summed it up a little bit better too on the consistency of us asking the directors or the managers of departments of truly what their vision is or what their opinion is on the amount of commissioners, a city manager versus chief executive, and things like that. So when I read question 3, if you could also elaborate if you have an opinion on that as well as Ms. Hogart did. But number 3, what changes, if any, in governmental structure, organization, or powers would help the government buildings department address its most critical problems? And then kind of a, you know, part B to that is if you have any comments on the amount of commissioners, whether proponent or opponent of that, as well as a city manager or chief executive. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. You know, I don't know. And I think the two are kind of intertwined as far as, I guess, where buildings come from. You know, nobody likes to pay for maintenance. You know, paint is a good one. New window treatments is good, maybe carpeting, but, you know, that doesn't get to the backbone of a lot of our problems. You know, there's a lot of, in the mechanical world, what we call RTF, run to fail. You let a piece of equipment run, it dies, and then if nobody really notices, it sits there dead, and you move on until something else, and, you know, you try to get that. But we've got a lot of that in our buildings, you know, but they cost a ton of money. And again, you know, Civic Center probably has 40% of their mechanical stuff. Air handlers, unit heaters are dead, just hanging there. But obviously a new floor looks a lot better than a heater. You know, that's just, so coming down to this, you know, the commissioners, and I think that they all do a good job, and I think everybody's hearts are in the right place. But they're elected positions, and they're representing a constituency. It just seems to me that if there were fewer, and they were maybe full-time or they were dedicated as commissioners, that, you know, you could kind of break it down in a flow chart or a structural chart where, you know, somebody could be like the main speaker or communicator for the public works, and maybe one for the buildings, and maybe one for the roads. I don't know, but, you know, it seems that it seems to me, and again, I know maintenance, it's negative in connotation anyways. I mean, if nothing broke, there wouldn't be maintenance, and then I wouldn't be standing here as I am right now, right? But nobody likes to spend the money on it, and, you know, it's, you get what you can, and you just continue to try to at least slow down the degradation of how things break.
Mr. Sullivan, if I could clarify, you said that you would create sort of a system in which each commissioner perhaps would have certain departments that they're in charge of communicating with, or it's their responsibility to be the person that's bringing information back to the commission? Is that what you were suggesting?
I think so, kind of like maybe the university systems or like corporate America, they all have departments under them or something along them lines, but yeah.
Okay, so then you were looking at solving that problem of how does communication get through to the directors or to the commission, and then also to the public in regards to the reason we're spending, whatever, $20 million is because we haven't upgraded our facilities for 20 years, and that commissioner would be responsible for that communication.
I believe so, somebody that's in charge of the budget process, that's, that holds the purse strings, they could maybe help out with a strategic plan or a capital improvement plan, that goes around through all the departments. I mean, I'm sure everybody's in the same boat I'm in, not enough people and not enough money. But yeah, it just seems like, the buildings maintenance or buildings part of it kind of gets left off to the side, and JP's been great, I mean, I'll be honest, but again, I think it's a lot of COVID money that we're spending right now, so my concern is moving forward from here.
There. Other follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you say to us, from your estimation in the 3.5 years that you've been the buildings manager, I can't believe you have to cover so much ground with all these different facilities that you have to take care of, but can you tell us if there's a critical list of like the top 5 or 10 that if you don't fix, that they would just be shot and there'd just be no way to get them up to standard to actually keep using? I guess, is that a critical mass kind of thing with particular buildings, or are all of just kind of ebb and flow with different things that you have to fix? Does that make sense?
It does, Cindy. So what we have is, like I say, we worked up along them lines. It took probably 18, 20 months to develop a list from all the buildings on, first off, basically doing a conditional assessment of the buildings and then the equipment involved, and then coming up with a plan on replacing or repairing, and it's really, if a building management firm was in charge of this stuff, they would have a plan. They know, like a standard residential furnace has a lifespan of 15 years, right? An air handler or rooftop unit is 20 years. Boiler, cast iron sectional, smaller one, they're 20 years. A commercial one is 30 years. So they have that. So whether you amortize, how you pay for that, or, there would be a plan. Right now, it's we don't have a critical failure list, but we did put these kind of in a plan to try to get them in the budget. Roofs are another great one, and unfortunately, I'm kind of the guy standing when the music stopped. I couldn't find a chair. Last time we did a lot of roof repair or replacement was 25 years ago. They have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years. I mean, that's, so it could be budgeted for, but, when I leave, if somebody takes my documentation, they do, and if they don't, they start from scratch. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't seem like there's, even like a handbook or something that would be developed on preventing these panic modes at the end of every budget cycle. Right now, if something dies, you hope to nurse it along or keep it going until the next budget, and then get it, approved by the budget. Now, that leads to one other part of this, which is the next one on my list, is every department is responsible for their own budget. So I can go to Chad and say, you've got 3 garage doors, a boiler, or Zach, right, or anybody, right? This is what you got. And this is what, I recommend getting replaced or put in your budget next year. And it may or may not get included, or it may or may not get approved. That's, and that's, all the buildings. The library has their own budget. Mother Lode has their own budget, Business Development Center has their own, law enforcement has their own detention center. I mean, everybody has their own budget that I have to ask them to get or beg them to put in and then move forward.
Follow-up questions? Mr. Thielen, you're up.
Madam Chair, thank you. John, thanks for being here. So with your last statement, do you think some of these are kind of mismanaged then? Some of these departments? Not by you, but by their
No,
lack of energy to put this into the budget that needs to be fixed?
no,
and
I don't think
repaired?
so. I mean, you know, everybody has a finite budget. You know, you had your budget last year and, you know, you might get a 3% or you might, you know what that is. So what do you take money away from to pay for a building improvement? That, I mean, that's, I don't think anybody mismanages their funds. I don't, or mismanages their budget cycle. It's just you've got a pie, right? And capital or mechanical equipment and roofs and building related items, when they hit their end of their life, they're all expensive. You know, $500,000 for the courthouse roof, right? Nobody sees it, you know, how, you know, can you just put patches on it? I mean, that's what it comes down to. We just did the racetrack volunteer fire department. 8 years ago, they did half the building and not the other half. The other half let loose this last year, which then leads to repair work inside that we do in-house, right? You know, we patch the water damage and we paint it and that stuff. But, I mean, that's, you know, I'm sure at some point somebody asked for a full replacement and they were only given half the money and half the roof got replaced.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to that point, can you tell us about how government buildings, do you ever outsource to a private contractor? What is the cost that you see using your own staff to do these patches and these things to keep these buildings going versus outsourcing, or a department head outsourcing the work to a private contractor to get the work done that's critical?
Yes, we do. And there's two parts to that. Another key component of funding for building repair and maintenance, not key, but it's there, is our insurance, MMIA. If we can get them to pay for it, then that's great. Our deductible is, I can't remember if it's $5,000 or $7,000. That comes out of government buildings or the property itself. And then and then it's going through the same thing, getting 3 bids, showing them what you need. Then you go back and forth with MMI. It's very, very time consuming, you know, probably 18 months from start to finish, with the exception of FD1. That one was rocket fast. I mean, that was 6 months, wasn't it? Start to finish? Or 5 months? What's that? It was. It was exceeded, and I think a lot of that was because they reside over there, and you know they're manned 24/7. But so we outsource there. We outsource. We get contractors where we can on the bigger projects, but that's money, you know, and that's the other part of it. When you get into these. Into the other buildings, you're asking somebody to put more money into their budget, which means that they may have to take money away from something else. Yeah.
Any other questions? Follow-up. Okay, Mr. Thielen, can you take number 4, please?
Madam Chair, thank you. John, what advice would you give the study commission in terms of conducting a comprehensive and impactful review of the local government?
You know, honestly, I think that what you guys are doing right here answers that question. I mean, you guys are segmenting every part of the government, all the department heads. I think elected officials, I'm not sure if you are or aren't. But, I mean, just that right there and asking the questions while you have somebody in front of you where you can bounce off and talk. I think that that is probably the best way of seeing how this all works, right? Where it goes from here, how the report or whatever comes out of it looks is one thing, but I think this right here is probably the best thing that could happen.
Any follow-ups? Ms. Dolan, number 5, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, John, thank you for all your input. What what inefficiencies could be addressed through changes to the local government structure?
That's a loaded question. No, I mean, it's just slow by nature, and I get it. I mean, everybody wants to look out for taxpayer spending, and I probably dislike paying taxes as much or more than most people. I mean, it's just part of it. So I think that that's why all the hoops are in there. From my standpoint, in my position, one of the easiest ones for me is, we follow the MCA to a point, and then Butte-Silver Bow has their own set of standards, but MCA is anything over $10,000 requires 3 bids. Butte-Silver Bow uses $5,000. Well, $5,000 isn't a lot of money in today's world, and spending, like right now I've got a job out at Feely Water Treatment Plant that I need to get 3 bids on. It's at $7,000, $8,000, somewhere in there. That means I have to drive out to Feely, meet up with the contractor, bring him up, show him. It's a half a day job, right, to get 3 bids. I mean, that's just not it's a kind of a big waste of time on my part, but I get why you do it.
Follow-up questions? Mr. Sullivan, this isn't necessarily a follow-up question, rather it was kind of threaded through what you were saying in terms of the budget. So we don't have a building reserve fund in Butte-Silver Bow budget, or could you kind of describe that?
So I believe we do. So we have a capital improvement budget that government buildings is with. It's there's a couple different ones, but it's the 40/40 account is what I call it. And that's where I try to get my capital money from. I think it come from something, Hard Rock funds from some point back, and it had something to do with the tram, when they were looking to get in the tram. Dannette Gleason explained it to me one time, a long time ago. But it's more than just government buildings, right? I mean, that's the account that paid for the Montana Street and the retaining wall outside out there. I mean, it pays for a lot of major improvements, but I don't know how much money's there or what's there or what isn't there,
Great. Thank you. Any other follow-up questions? Okay. Ms. Casey, next question, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, John. Question number 6 is, what challenges do you foresee for Butte-Silver Bow in the next 10 to 20 years? And does the current government structure position the city-county to meet those challenges effectively?
I think the easy answer is I think Butte's going to continue to grow, and I think it's going to grow fairly quickly. And along them terms, I think you're going to continue seeing what we see right now, right? Is housing prices are going to go up. Now are the wages going to, be able to keep up with that? That is probably the biggest thing I see over the next 10, 20 years. Right now, what's happened with the housing costs in Butte over the last 5 years is, astronomical. I mean, getting up, not quite to Bozeman wage, but they're up there, and, our wages are still what Butte-Silver Bow wages are. So it feels to me like the cost of living is increasing faster than wages. That would be my answer. Are we structured for it? I think Infrastructure-wise, probably, I think, at one point, the city had 90 to 100,000 people, so I got to think the infrastructure was there, or has the potential of being there, but
Follow-up questions? I guess I just have more of a comment. My brain just keeps going over all of the things that you've been providing us. But so you said that you're missing kind of a strategic plan for building maintenance, and then you're also missing budget authority in some regards to do that maintenance and planning for that over the next 10 to 20 years. Wouldn't it be reasonable to think that these problems, if not addressed, are going to get even more
Compound.
profound?
yeah, they're going to compound, yeah, no doubt about it.
Okay, so perhaps in our recommendations, we should make recommendations to council and the chief executive that we address these challenges with the strategic planning of building maintenance and perhaps a budget authority for you, or a building reserve fund of some sort that we can essentially save into, if we're allowed to through MCA and our charter and our ordinances and all those things. But perhaps that's something we need to deeply investigate, especially as, we're sitting in an over 100-year-old building, so.
Yeah, and it was built well.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully, yeah.
Very good. Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, would it be better if the capital improvement budget was under, say, your building budget or the chief executives, versus each department having to try and get those capital improvements that they need within their own budgets? Would it be better to have one kind of capital improvement budget that could be used across all buildings that need to be maintained in Butte-Silver Bow?
Yes, so Lori, I think so. I think it should be facilities, and there should be a facilities fund, so it's buildings manager, which is fairly unique to Butte. I mean, if you Google buildings manager, there's only one thing that comes up, and it's Butte-Silver Bow. Typically building is a singular structure, and then when you get more than one, then you end up facilities. I think so. I think the facilities department or budget would alleviate that process from the managers of all the different facilities. I mean, I think it could be where, if you took all that money, you put it into a pot, then you should be able to at least have the appearance of a planned approach to take care of large capital projects. See, and we consider them capital projects, but a boiler replacement's a boiler replacement, right? But that falls under capital improvement, which I suppose it is. But on the other hand, it's equipment replacement. I mean, they're just parts of the thing. I think though. I think that if it was into one, whether it's under the chief executive or a group of people or whatever it is, to come up and make them decisions, I think that we could stretch them dollars a lot further.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's one way to go, and I think it's a great idea. But here's another idea that I want your opinion on. Because so many departments in Butte-Silver Bow have aging buildings, it's not just focused on like public works or what have you. Would it be, and again, with the charter revisions that we're attempting to do and updates that we're trying to do, we don't want to get too specific, but to that end, instead to have each department have, or say to each department, you need to put 10 or 20% of your budget and what you foresee as your budget to facilities to update them, and just, back them into a corner to say, you have to help with this. Not just the general taxpayer, but when the tax dollars come to, let's use Lynette as an example.
Yeah, nobody donates to maintenance.
Yes, right, exactly. So if you could allocate a specific amount of money for each department to say this is to constantly update or keep improvements, or do you like that idea, the first one of independent budget under facilities to do that kind of work?
Well, I I think they're both one and the same. I think that if you were to do facilities, have a facilities budget, and for major equipment replacement or capital improvements, I think that money is either you're going to have to raise taxes, which I don't foresee anybody doing in the near future. So that money would have to be stripped away in some form or fashion from each department or building. I think, I don't know. Or we start selling buildings and put that in there, I don't know.
Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, John, you just said something I've been thinking about for a minute. And some of these older buildings that you're going to have to put a lot of money into to repair, wouldn't it be better off to sell them?
You know, I kind of said that kind of on the sly, but, you know, I don't know. I think that it's kind of nice to have them. I think that there's a handful that are probably pet projects during an election cycle that we took on. Whether they add benefit to Butte-Silver Bow government or not, I don't know. I mean, you know, some days I'm very frustrated and I say sell them all or tear them down, and then other days it's like, you know, this is pretty neat and nobody else is going to be able to give these buildings that attention. And then now the other part of that though is, and I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect somewhere in the late 90s that Butte-Silver Bow floated a bond for buildings, because that's when all of the work was done, right? And then maybe another one about the time the detention center was built right after that. Well, so you take a look at the detention center right now, not to get too far off track, but everything up there is ready for replacement. I mean, it's 22, 23 years old, right? You know, and, you know, that's kind of a big ask for the detention center that's struggling with staff and overpopulated. You know, they must do really, really well on customer service up there because nobody wants to leave, and when they leave, they want to come back. So, but you know, so that's a new building, and that's where we're at. I mean, it's going to require a chunk of money here in the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, I can see it already, and we know that. We've already updated the security system, and now we're doing the temperature controls, which has led me to find all of these other issues. That's got a state-of-the-art HVAC system in it, and it works well. And it's working well right now, but now we found, you know, there's, I think, 25 fire and smoke dampers, electric actuators on there. Going through this, 24 of the 25 are dead, right? So there's sections of the building that get no airflow or not the right amount of airflow until we go up and get that done, you know, and it's probably going to be 3 to 4 hours actuator to get them replaced. You know, I mean, so these are one of the good thing is that we got the temperature control system up and running. It's on the computer and we can see it. It's digital control, but now we're finding all the other issues that we didn't know. So, you know, maybe I should turn the computer off and not see it and pretend like you don't know, or you fix it. Now going back to the older buildings, you know, you take the business development center. So that was all remodeled before Butte-Silver Bow in the mid-90s. So everything down there, with the exception of the boiler, that was replaced in somewhere around 2008 to 2012. So that's relatively new. That should have a 25-year lifespan on it. But everything else in there, the carpeting, the lights, ceiling tiles, you know, all of the things that nobody wants to spend money on, there, you know, it's in need of a facelift or a refurb, correct?
Other follow-up questions? Okay. So moving on to number 7, what is the current rate of annual compensation for the government buildings department director and members of your staff, and are these rates fair?
Well, we're going through negotiations, so apparently they're not fair. Nobody's getting paid near enough. So I have 5 different bargaining units that we deal with. We have the laborers, Luna, which is the service workers. I've got the operating engineers for maintenance. I've got operating engineers, painters, carpenter, and electricians. I have 16 employees, and so the service workers make about 50,000 a year, almost 51,000 a year. The carpenters, about 69,000 a year. The operating engineers, 67,000 a year. Electricians, 69,000 a year. The painters are 55,000 a year. And then I've got the night watchman, Rich, that locks up the courthouse. He's at 25.5, and then I make 89.9, so 90,000 a year.
And your compensation is fair and in alignment with others in your position?
Well, again, Butte-Silver Bow is the only one that has a buildings manager. They've got facilities director, building managers, other municipalities, or maintenance managers. And I would say I'm fairly compensated for any one of them positions, but all three, which we really do. Facilities directors, they make, a bit more, anywhere from probably 95 to 120.
Okay, excellent. Other questions or follow-ups? Right. Well, thank you for coming tonight and sharing your insights with us and your understandings of all the things that we operate. Holy cow. So we really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so moving on to item number 7, or correspondence or commission update, a report by Ms. Cohn.
Sorry about that. I had my notes, and I have no idea where I put my notes, so I'm winging it. I emailed the 3 people for next week and got 2 confirmations back already. We have Bill Melvin, we have Tim Cassidy, and we have one more. And he's the one I didn't get confirmation yet, but he might not have seen the email yet. And I just can't remember off the top of my head. But that's it, no new communications or anything.
Excellent. Moving on to unfinished business, our public outreach discussion. Mr. Seppen isn't here tonight to give us the follow-up on the op-ed pieces. I think Mr. Enruth, he was looking for an opinion on some language from you. I'm not sure if you guys had that conversation.
Madam Chair, we have not had that conversation yet, no.
Thank you. Any other comments or information about those? Okay. And then moving on to the discussion about a marketing or advertising contractor, we're just waiting for those to come in. That closes this week, and so we'll be looking for those and reviewing as they come in, and quite excited to have that piece of our actions finished and checked off into finished business or whatever ongoing instead of unfinished. So, all right, moving on to new business, our 30-minute charter review. I think preamble was accidentally left on the agenda. It should be section 7 and 8. Last week, I do believe that we kind of reviewed, but we wanted to have Mr. Enruth in the room too, so I invite any questions that may have been lingering from last week to come back as well. And we had also agreed that we would send Mr. Enruth our list of questions to give us, we were calling it Charter 101 or something, instead of, peppering him every evening without having time to prepare. So let's go ahead and do our walk through these next 2 sections and then circle back if we could. So starting in section 7.01, any questions or pieces there? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Matt, for being here. So this is just a generic question, but what really determines who gets listed in the charter as far as departments go? Because it does say administrative departments, but it's not really the same for everyone. Sometimes it'll say established by ordinance, and that sounds pretty legal, but others don't say that. So I just wondered if Matt could give us a little insight to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Madam Chair. I actually don't know the answer. I've had that answer like with a bunch of things that Butte-Silver does on why we do certain things that we do. And so I will write it down and try and find us an answer. But generally speaking, when we're looking at the charter, it gives us that directive. This specific section states, by ordinance. And then so the commissioners look at all the different departments and we establish the ordinances in which they need to fall under. So I would think common sense wise and legally speaking wise, that would be the proper avenue to go. But why some of them are listed in here and others are not, I do not know the answer to that question, and I'll see if I can find us one. Yep.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Matt, to that point, is it, in your opinion, thus far, is it better for departments to be in the charter or not in the charter because of flexibility or issues? Can you address that?
Commissioner Dolan, Madam Chair, legally speaking, and then based off of, my limited experience in government so far and the frustrating processes that we have, I would say the more flexibility, the better. And so when we're looking at this particular section, which states that offices are established by this charter or may be established thereunder by ordinance of the Council of Commissioners in order to execute and enforce their policy, gives a good array of everything. So we can all sit here and think as a commission, okay, we need a police department, a fire department, and X, Y, and Z. But that section then also gives the commissioners the ability to establish by ordinance the other departments as they kind of come and go. So I think that the more flexible the language is, the better, so long as it is also clear. Does that make sense?
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also note that in the charters that we are given by the MSU and some others that I've looked at, they don't specifically list their departments. They either give the authority to their Council of Commissioners or through their manager to the Council of Commissioners or that way, which does have a public process budget-wise and to develop the departments. And so I found that interesting that we were about the only one that I could find in the charter that actually lists a few departments, which I thought was interesting.
And Commissioner Casey, Madam Chair, that's probably because when they did this, they consolidated. So when I got to looking into, I've been particularly reviewing Bozeman and Missoula and their separate city governments versus their county governments. My guess is, based off of my review of everything, that there were certain things that they're like, okay, as a city county government, we need to look at an overall fire department. Where if you're looking at the city of Bozeman, they've got, police department, we'll go there. So if you're looking at Bozeman in general, you have a city police department and a county sheriff's office. So that's where I would say that some of these came into play in the charter, is there was overlap that required a police force to police Silver Bow County, but was not two separate entities. So if I had to give an answer on that right now with not knowing what they were doing back then, I would feel that that's probably a good general assumption.
Excellent. Other discussions on that first section, 7.01? Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to just drill down just for a little bit more on if you think, Matt, that generality in 7.01, and then if Butte-Silver Bow, if we were to keep that generality and take out some of those descriptions with the certain departments that are in the charter currently because of the 77 consolidation, the outward look, like the question that we asked the department heads about 10 to 20 years from now, and your thought of the more flexibility, the better, the more general, the better, and allowing the commissioner commissioners and the executive branch to make those determinations as opposed to the charter? What is your thought on, as we go from today, 2025, or excuse me, 2026, when this finishes, into the future, what is better that, or it's kind of like a crystal ball question, but what do you think is your opinion on that?
Commissioner Dolan, Madam Chair, you know, to be honest, I think the language that is in 7.01 is perfectly fine as it stands, and I think that's fine going forward in the future. I think that the thing the commission also needs to think about is if you were to change that specific language and then also change what departments were included in the charter itself outside of ordinances, could be a pretty big upheaval of our local government, and I think it would cause a lot of initial heartache that would take some time to work out. So that's where I would caution the commission on making such a drastic change there. I do believe that the departments that they have listed in the charter are appropriate. They are all standard ones that we would need no matter what. And then, but also allowing the commissioners by ordinance to remove, you know, any departments that do become obsolete in the future for some reason, if you know, technology continues to change, whatever. But yes, it's difficult to look at and say that in the future, you know, we're not going to need this, or this, you know, because you could also need the possibility of adding things to the charter, you know. So that's where I think leaving that additional, that language in there as it sits, I think is perfectly fine. Again, legally speaking, there's nothing that says you guys can't change it. I mean, you're looking at revamping the form of government and the charter, so that's what you're here for. Depending on the type of government that this commission, you know, wishes to present to the voters of Silver Bow County, and going forward is going to then detail how, you know, the commission establishes their ordinances and what ordinances are going to establish what departments and henceforth. So I think as it stands, it's fine. Legally speaking, it can be changed. And in the future, I can't really tell you. I don't have a crystal ball either. But I think, again, back to the generality of Section 7, allows for certain, you know, governmental agencies to be within the charter, and then allows the commission the flexibility of adding and reducing, you know, other governmental agencies that may or may not be needed as Butte-Silver Bow goes forward. But I think if you look at the ones that are in there, fire department, law enforcement, the building administration, you know, those are all departments that are never going to go away.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, what's your thoughts in this section 7 point? Some are referred to like finance and budget system. Others are public works department. And then when we get to like 7.06 is human resource department, but then when you get into the wording, it refers to system. So what's your thoughts of department versus system throughout the charter of that terminology?
Again, consistency is key here. When we start getting into the semantics of some of the words, I don't necessarily see a difference in how they're being used here. But again, that is something that this commission can look at, you know, cleaning up some of that language to be consistent across all of them. So, you know, a city county personnel department rather than system would be a change that you guys can have. Legally speaking, I don't think it has an issue. I think if I were to look at that section and say, you know, go to a court hearing and say, you know, in the Butte-Silver Bow Charter, this system says, this section says department, then this section says system. A judge is going to look at me and say, yeah, but come on, dude, they're the same thing. Like, this is how we're looking at them, you know. But it could be a language cleanup, absolutely.
A follow-up that, I guess, from working with Butte-Silver Bow, in my mind, a department is you create a department. And I'm going to use the land record system because the land record system is operated under the planning department. And so in my mind, a system could be operated wherever it best fits versus a department. And that might just be my workings of the local government versus someone else's. And so that's why I was asking.
Commissioner Casey, Madam Chair, in that context, yes, you're absolutely correct. And when I read that again, and now that you've said that, when we're talking about a personnel system, which shall provide for the hiring and promotion of local government employees, that's exactly what they're talking about. You know, they're talking about the system that is implemented for doing all of those things. So when we look at 7 section point 6 under the Human Resource Department, it says that they got to do the personnel system, they got to provide for job training. The interesting thing that's in there is it does not say that they shall create a human resources department, or where is one created. And again, I think that may be some language cleanup for the charter.
Ms. Shaw?
It's still deja vu, and Bob can confer with me on this one, but Section 706, it was called Personnel Department, and one of the changes of the 5 changes we made on our last, in 20 years ago, was to rename it Human Resource Department. And then, of course, in the body, it continues talking about personnel, but just that was something I wanted to clarify, that was changed as one of our ballot issues.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw and Madam Chair. And yes, when I look at that section, it says Human Resources Department, but that section, in my opinion, doesn't establish a Human Resources Department. It just says what they will do. Where if you look at section 7.05, Commissioners, there shall be established by ordinance and maintained a finance and budget system. So you have to have a finance and budget department essentially there too. So maybe some cleanup in here that we can look at is under section 7.5, a finance and budget department shall here be established by charter, in which they shall create, a finance and budget system. Those are things that we can obviously look at, yes.
All right, Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we wanted to reword it to where it was Land Records Department or Budget and Finance Department, is each one its own ballot initiative, or is there an ability to clean up some of this language without taking up our limited options to the public, I guess?
Commissioner Selk, I have absolutely no idea, but I will look at it. It's a very good question. When you boil it down to, can you just say, hey, these are all the changes we want to make in one budget initiative, or do you have to do it individually? And I honestly don't know the answer, but I will take a look and I will get back to you next week.
Mr. Silk, we also had the question last week too. I think Mr. Dennehy raised it regarding how many ballot initiatives we could put forward. Mr. Enruth, do you know, is there a limit on number of initiatives or ballot questions we can put forward, or are we allowed as many as we have paper and money to print ballots for?
Madam Chair, that is another question I'll have you hold off on me answering until next week.
Excellent, thank you. All right, going back to 7.01, Mr. Enruth, you had mentioned that when you were kind of riffing through this section, you said that they could establish or rescind, the Council of Commissioners could establish or rescind various departments if there was one that needed to be, retired. And I don't see rescinding, I see establishing in 701.
Madam Chair, that is correct. It doesn't say rescind. However, I do believe that when we look at our commission's ability to enact laws, they are the legislative branch. If it was brought to their attention, I do believe they may have the possibility of filing a new ordinance, to deal with that. It would only make sense. Now, if we're looking strictly at the wording of section 7.01, it could be argued, yes, that they only have the ability to establish departments. However, they do not have the ability to remove them. It would be a legal argument that would have to be fleshed out, and something that this council could look at doing and changing to make clear.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Silk.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but under 3.3, Powers and Duties of the Council of Commissioners, J, to eliminate a local office or department by ordinance if the state law eliminates such a local office or department. State law changes the name of a local office or department. The council of commissioners may change the name appropriate by the ordinance, all without the necessity of amending this charter. So would that be something that, would it be under the powers and duties of the council of commissioners? It's section 3.03, because, and I think that's one of the reasons that when we look at the other charters, they're not so strict, because it gives the legislative body the ability to release or add. So that was going to be my next question on the Parks and Recs is, do we even, if we want to separate those, I mean, it would have to be taken out of Public Works, so we would have to amend that anyway. So, but will we have to add it to the charter or just allow Butte-Silver Bow County Commissioners to add it by ordinance?
And Commissioner Silk, Madam Chair, if you look specifically at Section J, it's to eliminate a local office or department by ordinance if state law eliminates such local office or department by ordinance. So it gives them the power if the state somehow does something at the legislature that gives them that power. So I would say it does need to be cleaned up if you want to allow them to have that additional, that additional power to rescind a department. Because you now have you don't have two conflicting sections. You have one that says they have the ability to establish by ordinance, X, and then they have another one that says, hey, by the way, we do have the ability to remove a department by ordinance if the state says we have the ability to do so. In my legal opinion, I think it could be challenged that they also have the authority to, by ordinance, remove another department because it's not specifically prohibited. They're just given permission a certain way, and then it's basically silent in the rest of everything else. And so it's one of those things where that is one thing I think the commission probably does want to make very clear that, the study commission wants to try and make very clear is that the council of commissioners has the authority to, by ordinance, start a department and also by ordinance, get rid of one if need so. Now, again, there could also be other implications into that everybody that, while we're having that conversation is should the county commissioners have the authority to just get rid of a department? If someone simply states that we want to get rid of X department, but something to think about is, should there be a set of steps in place that prohibit just the ability of the government to just say we're done with this department, goodbye, if that makes any sense. I think that the commission really needs to put some thought into that. So there are some at least protocols and safety procedures in place so a department isn't just, eradicated overnight because an ordinance was approved and in 30 days, all of a sudden, that department no longer exists. Make sense? Which, when you start looking at all of these pieces in context, that makes sense to me. But again, legally speaking, I'm not saying that they may not already have that ability, but I do think it needs to be cleaned up again.
Excellent and fair point in regards to, that's exactly where I was going in terms of if we establish by charter that they can rescind, then we open up risk, if you will, to political will that is maybe not in the best interest of the community in terms of we're done with public works, they're gone. So we have to be very careful with thinking about the procedure and if that would need to be in charter or if we leave it silent, as you've used that word, and we put it in ordinance or I don't know what the best thinking is here in that regard. But it seems that there is some need for some language here and that perhaps we need to take some good deliberation with this question.
Madam Chair, I agree.
Other commissioners, do you have thoughts off the top of your head at this moment, like just the first blush? Shaw?
I don't know off the top of my head, but first blush. With Chad's remarks about the Parks and Recreation Department, it looked like it seemed to be something we want to make a standalone department. But that doesn't eliminate it. It just comes out from under, just like when animal control used to be under Public Works, we made it standalone. I think it would be important to have something like that in the charter, just standalone, and then it doesn't, you'd have to change the vernacular on the Public Works Department anyways, because it's written in there that it's one of their duties under Public Works. But that, I'm just throwing that out to Matt. Go for it.
I don't disagree. I think that, what this commission needs to look at is, these are the departments that we believe Butte-Silver needs. This is why we want to codify them in the charter rather than by ordinance. You're giving them what's the word I'm looking for? They're important. They're not just, hey, we just want you to come up with a bunch of ordinances to establish the departments. The study commission, the people that were elected by the people of this city, put forth in the charter what, they believe the city is looking for. And I think by codifying these, departments like that, including Parks and Rec on its own, shows that you've listened to people and that you've made sure that that is an important part of your decisions. And so rather than leaving it to the commission to establish by ordinance that department, you are codifying it in the charter, if that makes sense.
So that brings us to section 7.02 nicely. So if we want to walk through that particular section with Public Works, we've circled Parks and Recreation as something we need to clean up and talk about pulling out as its own department. Any other questions, changes, suggestions? Ms. Casey?
Madam Chair, I just make a comment that we haven't heard from the public on the Park and Recs. We've only heard from the Park and Recs director. So I would just caution us to saying we're going to pull it out and make it its own department without, maybe this is one of the ideas with our folks that come in with consulting that we talk to the public about. But we've only heard from the Park and Recs director who very elegantly stated why it should be out, but I think we also need to hear from the public before we start saying we're going to. And I guess I do have a question for Matt, and this will go back to if we get to lump some of those in our things. If you lump all the say Park and Rec, IT, and you start, and then the public says, well, I want this one, but I don't want this one, but they're all in one question, it either gets approved or it goes down. I don't know how that, on a ballot measure, how that works either. Because I get the lumping because I do believe the MSU said we can only have maybe 5 changes at our initial training that when they came in. But I went back to my stuff and couldn't find that in anything, so I don't know the number of changes. But if you do start lumping them, the public may want some, but they may not want the others. I don't know how that's going to work either.
And thank you, Ms. Casey. I appreciate you bringing us and putting the punctuation on the public process that has yet to be fully developed. And so I appreciate that. And I didn't mean to imply this is done. It's rather a consideration that we have. So I thank you for clarifying that. And great question, because you're right. Like, it might be, well, we don't want this Public Works Department to lose Parks and Rec, but we want to, change up how we say Human Resources Department and what Human Resources is doing. So, excellent question. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, 2 things. One, Matt, I would also ask maybe MSU about the time and the range with which we can change things in the charter. I mean, if it's only 5 and we haven't done this for over 20 years, there's a lot of stuff that we have to go through and ask the public about, and there may be 8 things or 10 things that need to be upgraded, that need a ballot, need a vote of the public.
Which, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dillon. When Commissioner Casey said only 5, I'm like, we discussed 5 tonight alone with
Right.
one director.
Right.
So I literally have got,
Right.
someone said 5.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Where is
So
that,
we will
right.
look for it, yeah.
So that was of concern to me immediately, because I'm thinking this has not been touched for 20 years. And as we have seen over the course of weeks, there are things that don't even existed 20 years, or to Cindy's point always, which is a good one. So yeah, I would love to have that clarification. I'd like to ask about section 7.02B. And I know, again, we always go back to, we don't want to be too specific, but B states only qualified, the Public Works Director qualified by training or experience. I think we are still the only county that doesn't have a Public Works Director who is a certified engineer. And the complexity and technological things that are happening today moving forward, that might be something we need to put on the Council of Commissioners to address that, because a couple chief executives ago, they said and agree, and I think the commission agreed that it was okay to hire someone that's not a professional engineer. And I don't know if it's a detriment or if it's, the more qualifications, the better. But then we've heard again and again, week by week, that week goes by, about staffing issues. So we kind of have to weigh those things, but that B is of concern. Thanks.
I mean, Commissioner Nolan, I do have an opinion on it. Legally speaking, I mean, obviously this commission can change, what it's looking at changing. But from a common knowledge, perspective, everybody, we always want the best trained, most educated people. And I believe that this commission has seen multiple times now throughout the interviews that have happened, the institutional knowledge of this place tends to be significantly more valuable than educational or university knowledge from someone that doesn't know how this city works. I actually, a really good example of this, I think, and the reason I know this is just because of my father, was the foreman in the relay department for Northwestern Energy for, 25 years. He hired his last 3 bosses. And he will tell you that engineers do not know anything until they have been in the job for a certain amount of time. That is institutional knowledge. He said anytime he got fresh engineers fresh out of school, they were always brilliant. They understood engineering. They understood how to, design and build things, but when it came to practical application, they didn't have that base institutional knowledge, and they had to learn that. And so I think that the commission the study commission, needs to take that into consideration, particularly with Butte, when we're looking at, these types of jobs. I do think that when, people apply for this, if they have an engineering degree, obviously it could give them a step up, but do you make it a prerequisite for being able to even apply when the person, when you have someone retire and the next person in line has been underneath them for 10 years and knows everything about this city? I think that institutional knowledge really needs to be given, the same credit per se as a engineering degree or something like that would. And so I would just make the suggestion that you take that into consideration when we're looking at that type of terminology for these types of positions.
And Mr. Enruth, isn't it also true, legally speaking, that qualified by training or experience implies training through going to get a certificate or a degree program? Like when you sit for your PE exam, that is a training. It's not saying you have to have a bachelor's. Training doesn't necessarily not imply a degree.
Yeah, and Chairwoman Brandel, exactly, and that's what I was saying was, I think that by having it entitled training and experience, obviously an individual with an engineering degree has training and experience in that particular area, and this is, where their leg up is.
Mr. Thielen?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Enruth on that. It's a lot of the jobs that are out there, if you're qualified and you have the experience, that outweighs a college degree any day, in my opinion. So I think that needs to be looked at.
Ms. McCormick?
Well, I just have to say, I mean, certainly experience means a lot, but when it comes to engineering, you also have to be able to sign off on engineering drawings, and there are qualifications that you have to do that. You have to be a certified engineer. And so what Butte-Silver ends up doing right now is doing a lot of stuff with consultants, paying money for consultants to prepare the drawings and have them be signed. And I think what we don't know is what that costs us. Is that more expensive? We used to have several engineers on staff in the public work who were young, energetic people that did a lot of really good work. So I don't know. I think we don't know what the balance is of what it costs us to hire contractors to do the work or have people in-house who are qualified that meet those standards.
Mr. Enruth?
Chairman Brandel, Commissioner, I agree with you, Ms. McCormick, but also disagree, and here's why. So currently in my office, and this is something you guys will listen to me talk about, we deal with a lot of Superfund stuff. It is a very specialized area. I would equate, and again, this is just my suggestion, and you are 100% correct, it needs to be looked at. Is it more cost effective to have a hired out engineer on a certain project that specializes in that area, or is it better to have a general type engineer, full-time in-house? And I can tell you that when I look at certain things in my office, it is 100% beneficial to have the outside specialized expertise and then have someone in-house that can finish up the project after they've green-lighted it. We do that all the time in the county attorney's office, specifically because, the law and engineering and all these things are such vast areas that being able to go out and get that specialized expertise is very valuable. But then again, as Commissioner McCormick, you stated, it does boil down to budgets and money and what the county is willing to do in those types of areas. And again, you can also get into things like, did the county engineer that was hired develop the engineered plans in the correct way? And then if something fails, the county's on the hook. Or if the hired outside firm had an issue, we then have another individual to bring in. So there's all kinds of facets to that, which is why I again would go back to, I wouldn't limit those types of job descriptions. However, I would 100% take them into consideration, but then also take into consideration the budgetary aspects of it.
Ms. Shaw was first, I think, and then I'll take you, Ms. Casey.
Well, Mary stole my thunder. But that's okay. I'm just kidding. So I'm looking at this purely by just semantics. General terms, it's our blueprint, our Bible, whatever you want to call it. It's general terms are good. You're not pigeonholed by one word like engineer. And we have had people that were not certified engineers, but their staff, they had one. They had an engineer on staff. So they're able to, they're the director, they're able to get a more rounded, experience throughout the department. But training and experience, I think those two words are great as far as general terms, and I think that they probably should stay that way. That's my opinion. But we have had non-engineer public works directors. I think of Dan Dennehy and our current one, but they always had the staff that filled in with the engineering aspect of it. A lot of these young fellows that were just amazing. So it's a matter of a team. That's kind of my thought on it.
Thank you. Ms. Casey?
I would agree with Cindy that of leaving the training experience. I don't think the public works director necessarily needs to be an engineer or a professional engineer. They may need staff and engineers under them, but when you get to roads, you need a civil engineer. You may need a bridge engineer. When you get to water, you need an engineer that focuses on the water side of things. The same with the metro. There's a wide gamut, even if you are a professional engineer, of what you need to do. I think we're one of the few cities that don't have an engineering department. Most do. We, in the planning department, had to hire engineers to look at the floodplain aspect in drawings. You need a wide range of different types of engineers. So I don't necessarily think the public works director, and at one time we did have a public works director, that was a professional engineer that never stamped anything. Do exactly what Mr. Enra said, because of the liability of that. That engineering stamp also means a lot, and it takes on the liability. So I think the training and experience for the public works director is fine. I think if we wanted to look at something, we might look at that we maybe need an engineer or an engineering department. That would be my recommendation.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, we also need to be cognizant of the fact, again, and it was reiterated before about the public input. I know I've received a lot of input from folks that are not happy with the fact that Butte-Silver Bow pays twice or three times on a particular project. We have in-house staff, we outsource this to consultants or other engineers, and yes, it could be for liability, but the fact of the matter is who holds the bill, who has to pay the bill? It's the taxpayer. And so trying to not only educate but convince a taxpayer that paying 2 and 3 times on one project is the way to go is going to be a hard sell. Because I think people are looking for efficiencies in any way that we can, despite the challenges that every community has right now. But I think as a study commission, we have to be, and I'm glad that we've had the department heads come in and explain what they do and the challenges that they have. And ultimately, when we start these listening sessions, it's going to be really valuable for us to hear from the public about the structure now and what we do now. And I think just the money going out the door seems to be a lot more than what's coming in, and it's been a balancing act for finance and budget to not raise taxes. But if we continue down this road, tax increases are almost inevitable because of the rising costs of everything. So I just want to keep that in the back of my head, and I just wanted to articulate that tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Dolan. It's bringing to mind as well, we've heard from many directors that they're feeling that they're short-staffed. And then, we're considering this question of creating many departments. And so we have, on balance, that comes with the budget that we have and the capacity that we have to do any increases. So I think in terms of our business, it's really looking at how do we set up the future Council of Commissioners and all of the future division directors for success with what's in this charter, given the challenges that we may be facing. So I appreciate this conversation very much. Can we move on to the next section? 7.03 is about our fire department, and Mr. Enruth, I know where is the bill from the legislature? Did it get signed? Did it read through everything? I guess that was my question, because it was deferring back the relationship between our volunteer fire departments and our fire departments was going to be basically pushed back into the charter. And so we had said after we get through session and the governor has signed this bill, then we would come back to that conversation. I don't know if we're prepared for that tonight, or we want to circle back to a longer meeting with just this section.
Chairwoman Brandel, I believe the bill is sitting on the governor's desk. I don't think he's acted on it yet. But I have not checked it today, and it's Monday, and I usually check about every other day.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, to that point, the governor's office received the bill on Friday, the 9th, and they have 10 days. The governor has 10 days to either sign or veto. And so that would be 18th, 19th, and those are calendar days, not business days. So it's just a direct shot. So yeah, same thing. I don't think he has done anything action on it yet, but I would concur that we should probably skip over this, wait till a decision's made, and then come back to it. Thank you.
I agree.
Any other discussion, or is it okay to come back? Circle back? Okay. Very good. So then moving on to 7.04, Ms. Casey, you had raised the thing about a lands record system that's operated out of the planning department. Do you feel that this language is sufficient?
Madam Chair, I do. My question came more from some are systems, some are department, and just back to what I explained. In my mind, a system can go where it's needed or best fit, and a department means you're making a department with a department head and the staff that you need. So I don't feel that this needs to be changed. I was just wondering why the difference in some areas, and that's just how I was looking at it, with system versus a department.
I appreciate that. Thank you. How about section 7.04? Was there any further discussion on 04? And how about section 7.05, finance and budget? I think we have this question again of department versus system in here, because we say there shall be established by ordinance and maintained a finance and budget system. Do we need to call out a department?
Chairwoman Randall, Commissioner Casey made a very valid point there. Systems can go wherever you need them to. Departments have to be created. So realistically, when I read this and I'm thinking about it, the previous, the charter required that the system be created, and then by ordinance established how the system would be created. Or technically they could have said, for instance, lands records went to already created Department X. So I think the language is specific for a reason. It allows, again, for flexibility of creating a full-time department, budget and finance department, through ordinance to install the system itself, or if the county already had something in place, the flexibility of allowing that department to take it over. I'll do some more research on it, and we got to look at some records. But really, that's my take on it, my feel on it right now. After Commissioner Casey said that, it makes a lot of sense.
And I think there was some discussion from our treasurer in that there was different duties between the budget office and her office that had been over the years disaggregated and reaggregated, and perhaps that gives that flexibility for the various elected officials in this council of commissioners to do what they see fit by ordinance in order to make things work efficiently. Ms. Casey?
I would agree, because I think some of our budget and finance system is also covered under the auditor. And the auditor has certain duties under ordinance, which would appear to be part of the budget and finance system, if you will. So I think it does provide the flexibility of where it best fits and who has the capabilities and maybe the technology to do it.
Any other questions or comments on this section or thoughts? All right, so moving on to section 7.06, Human Resource Department.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I guess my comment would be, I'm wondering why it's department when you read A and B and it refers to system. I think that would just be a cleanup, again, one way or the other, because when you read A and B, they refer to creating this system for training, job training, and that versus the department shall. When you go back up to Public Works, there's kind of the shall of what the department will do. So in my mind, it just needs, if we have the option to clean it up, it just needs to be cleaned up one way or the other.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Lori. I mean, it's a consistency thing. It makes you think that there's something different, but you definitely need to keep the human resource part of that title just because we changed that. But yeah, consistency, if it's not consistent, it brings up a question. It might be totally, innocent, let's just say. There's nothing to be said about what's the difference. But that could be a housekeeping thing. I think that we can have one category that maybe just changes something as a housekeeping item. I don't know if that would fall under that. That it's just semantics and doesn't really mean anything, but just to be consistent. That's just my thought.
Perhaps. I do have a question. I think, Mr. Unworth, you might be able to help advise in this. Isn't it important to have sort of an independent HR department who's independent from the department heads, independent from the executive in a lot of ways? I mean, they do report, but because employees have recourse if they have a complaint or they have an expectation of privacy to be able to, make a complaint if there were, say, a harassment issue or something like that. Isn't it important to have a department?
Chairwoman Brennel, I agree, yes. There are a lot of businesses whose HR departments fall under legal. You see that quite a bit. And I do think that it is important, particularly in a county setting, particularly in a county where you have a very large workforce, that the HR department be its own entity. So they feel that employees have got the ability to go to, essentially an independent party outside of their own department. It also makes things, a lot easier when dealing with investigations and personnel termination, things like that. You have your director or department heads that have possibly written an employee up multiple times. It goes through the proper HR process, and then HR gets involved and can also make their recommendation. It provides a good legal barrier and a protective barrier for the employees of the county.
So going back to our earlier conversation with flexibility, we wouldn't necessarily want flexibility in this particular section. We would want it to either be in legal, like for instance in the county attorney's office, or its own department, and not be swept up into Public Works or something else. Public Works has all the departments, it seems.
Chairwoman Brendel, yes. I think that you should have a human resources department, and that legally speaking, if the charter specifically is prescribed for that, it would be clear, and that it could be titled correctly. But then again, like if you go back and look at the fire, section 7.43, which deals with the fire departments, it specifically states in that first part of that section, you will have this individual that is the head of the fire department. That could be the added additional text to the section under the Human Resources Department, that the county will have a Human Resources Department headed by so-and-so. And then the next two sections still say the same, that the HR system is to be put in place. Those are possibilities, yes.
Other questions or comments on that section? And then we heard from Animal Services tonight, so section 7.07.
My legal opinion is she's fine. She's funded by outside sources. A lot. I don't know why. It just keeps happening. Hey, you know what? I'm okay with it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Dolan?
No, you're fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would suggest in because of Lynette's discussion with us tonight, that we consider and maybe ask the public for their input as well with regard to animal services. Now that they're their own standalone, it does say manager in that little section 7.07, to maybe bump it to a director, because all the other department heads are directors, but that's just more informational than or on a to-do list. Thanks.
Other comments? Okay, moving on to Article 8, Service and Taxing Districts, Section 8.01, Parts A and B. This seems boilerplate and pretty easy in regards. Ms. Shaw?
Yeah, I agree. It says right there, permitted by state law. Then, as far as I'm concerned, it is what it is.
Chairman Brendel, Commissioner Shaw, absolutely. It's literally the language that states you can tax the citizens of this county as provided by state law, and that is it.
Excellent. Did you want to change it, Mr. Thielen? Absolutely. Okay. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask in this section about, we hear all the time that the property tax owners in Butte-Silver Bow carry the biggest burden of taxation in this county. And it doesn't include, we don't have a sales tax in the state of Montana, so all of the folks that are renting don't really, unless they, within their own facility, pay, those things, but it's on the property tax, it's on the owners, not the renters. So I don't know if it's something we'll hear in our listening sessions, but again, it's something that I've heard over time, that there's not an equal balance of taxes being paid for the folks that possibly rent or other factors. I don't know if this section is applicable to that, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Chairwoman Brandon, Commissioner Dolan, when we're talking about a tax perspective in this particular section, it's just specifically relating to what the city-county government can do with regards to taxing its citizens here. If we start looking at, local land tax, or not local land tax, at state, land taxes and the, standard cost of those, I can tell you from a business perspective and a private legal attorney perspective that represented multiple rental agency type companies, that cost is generally passed on to the renter, which is why you constantly see an increased cost in rent. And a lot of it has to do with increased costs in taxes and, if the landlords are paying utilities. So while I think, someone could make the general argument that people that are renting are not paying taxes, I would make the counter argument that they're actually paying the building owner's taxes, just because it's generally passed on. But again, that's also probably going to be really case by case basis. Sometimes landlords aren't going to raise, the cost of renting an apartment because they've got really good renters and they don't want to risk losing them for the next person that can simply afford it. That's all private business, a private business decision that I don't think that the government should be involved in, legally speaking. And also, I don't think it's appropriate for that section if we're talking about just general taxation.
So, yes, that is correct. But the concern, and this maybe, it's obviously, I don't think with the charter itself, but with the Council of Commissioners and government itself doing all the fees. And so you have our list of the property taxes, and it's getting longer and longer and longer for every fee, and they'll say, oh, it's only the cost of a cup of coffee. Well, it's a heck of a lot of coffee. I remember when I was a commissioner, it was insane. It was like, okay, how many more cups of coffee do I think I need to owe? So yeah, that's always a concern and always something, and I hope we get input on that when we reach out to the public.
And Commissioner Dolan, I agree with you there. I think that when we're talking about taxation, that would be a different form of taxation. You know, we're talking about garbage fees and sewage fees and things like that. That specific section is just talking about general taxation, you know, on the individuals that live here. But I do appreciate that, particularly because I live on Beef Trail and I pay for services I don't get. And so I'm not unaware of the issue.
Excellent. So that brings us through what our homework was for this week. So looking ahead, we would be in Article 9 and Article 10 for next week to review. And then please let's bring back all of our questions and get those ready for Mr. Enruth. I was just going through my notes thinking about all of the questions that we had last week as well, so I appreciate our collective brain on that to make sure that we get them all into that discussion time. So when we come back and start to chew on these questions about what we'd like to change, we have a working document that we're rolling through. All right. Also in new business, there was item B, should we change question 3 to ask if folks want less commissioners or a city manager? And I would like to make a comment on this question before we mull it. I like the question being open-ended because I think we have received feedback and advice from people that wasn't what we expected in terms of, the less commissioners, city manager. Those two questions just happen to be the follow-up because it has been brought forward by many of the directors. I feel less inclined to change the question and more inclined to be less leading with the question and the follow-up, because I think sometimes, like tonight, our members that were giving us information were maybe like, well, I don't know, but I guess when you say it, maybe. And I feel like we're somewhat leading the horse. I'd like to hear more open-ended responses to that question if we could. And then as we go out, of course, to public hearing time, or we're going to our public listening sessions, we'll have to be specific with that question in terms of what people understand, or but I want to hear from people what their ideas are. And I hate to, I guess, color for them before we've heard ideas. So I'd, open it up for further discussion. Ms. Dolan?
Yes, Madam Chair, I totally agree, because some of the things we've received input from the department heads as a wide-ranging question, number 3 being a wide-ranging question to get that specificity from their experience of working in that particular department. I think it might be even advantageous to add that as a follow-up to say about the specificity of the commission size, nature of the commission, full and part-time, and then the city, county, the city manager, chief executive or mayor role, a figurehead, maybe kind of flush out a question as a follow-up, official follow-up, if you will. That may help as well to get, sometimes they're not eager to answer because they don't want to get political, but it's something that's really not so much political as it is, not wanting to offend anyone that's currently like a commissioner or a chief executive, but to say what is going to be the best for Butte moving forward.
Mr. Silk?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. To some, I added that into the OneDrive on the question so I wouldn't forget to bring it up. But I agree with Cindy that we always ask it. And I feel like sometimes we're catching them off guard to the point where they don't want to make an opinion, but if they had a little bit of time and not put on the spot, they might be able to formulate a very good answer to it. And I know that we want to hear that from them. I just wanted to bring it up under new business because we're always asking it, and I just feel that it's important to let them, kind of be aware that we're going to ask it. So thank you.
Well, have we been fair to everybody else? They're just I think it's okay to add that as a, this follow-up has been asked by all other department heads, so FYI, I guess, in a way, regarding that. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Silk.
I got one thing under new business, one more thing under new business, if you don't mind. You know, when I come here, and well, going back to when all of us decided that we wanted to run for this body, House Bill 547 was, I didn't even know that it even existed. And then since it came up, it's almost like it's an elephant in a room everywhere I go, except for a few people that have asked me about it. When I come here, I try to wear study commission hat, Chad Silk, member of the community, father of 4, looking to revise the charter for going forward. And I've been lucky enough to talk with Ms. Dolan and Ms. Dennehy about House Bill 547 to give my input. And I appreciate County Attorney Enruth bringing it up on the meeting that I wasn't here. I think that's great. That's what he ran his campaign on, was the transparency, and he's the one that brought it up. I find it difficult, because this is the first time that I've been in a position like this, to not make comments about the fire department, because that's what I'm not here for. I really urge anyone who's listening, or any of my fellow commissioners here, to please ask me about it if you have any questions. I know there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of unknowns, but we haven't been getting a lot of questions on what it does, what it doesn't do. And the second that we adjourn from this meeting, I will put any hat that you would like me to put on and answer any questions that you would like. At the end of the day, opinions need to be valued, and I understand that. But also, what is most important to this community, in my opinion, is public safety, and that's what that bill is about, if you read the content of the bill. And that's as far as I'm going to go on my opinion on House Bill 547. But I would ask that if anyone has a question, to please bring it up. It's a boogeyman in a closet, and it doesn't need to be. It's all affecting the public for the good of the community. So when we adjourn, the second after, anyone, please ask me about it. Any commissioners or anyone listening to this, our emails should be on the website. And at the end of the day, it's about public safety, and we can all agree on that is more important than anything else. And there's opinions on how it was brought up, how it was presented, and those are opinions. But again, public safety is where the content of the bill is driven by. So I guess please ask me questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silk. And for the good of the order, since we're on the conversation with the fire department piece, I have been talking with chiefs of the volunteer department to ask that they would be able to come forward and talk about their perspectives of what needs to be included in the charter, waiting to hear about House Bill 547 and what's coming of that before we begin this process, because our language in our charter is pretty solid. And it's a matter of thinking about what needs to be in there so that we can be in a solution-seeking mode and creating the best and most reasonable solutions for the next 20 years. And we do need to hear from everyone, including yourself and your colleagues, and including the fire chiefs of the volunteer departments. It's just a matter of scheduling and getting this work done. I'd like to dedicate, a meeting that's just for this section, if we can, because I think it's going to be significant, especially if 547 is signed into law, and we need to make our charter work for that. What's needed from the volunteers and from the career. And like you said, Mr. Silk, safety in our community is of forefront in our mind. How do we meet the needs of this vast, it's not the largest county by no means, it's the smallest, but rather we do have a lot of diversity in terms of where people live. And I'm constantly thinking about that urban wildland interface, especially with our facing climate changes that we're having in the next 20 years and likelihood of that fire danger getting worse over time. So it is a robust conversation. I appreciate you bringing it up. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Chad, for your transparency and your feelings about it. And I really appreciate the fact that you use the word a hat, because you are wearing a hat as a study commissioner. When I was a commissioner, I set myself aside. It was one vote, I always said. And, you know, this whole study commission is about the community at large. And I wouldn't want to be in your place because I know it was a contentious thing, but just thank you for putting on the study commissioner hat. Don't ever feel like you have to recuse yourself. You're here to represent, you were voted for by the community to represent the community. And so don't ever feel like you have to recuse yourself in any way, and anybody on the study commission. We're here as a voice, and we're trying to learn and listen. But yeah, that's the whole thing, is it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about what we're doing for the community. Thank you for that.
I don't know who had their hand up first. Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chad, I would just echo what Cindy said, because I know you have two different hats, but you also have experience, and we're here to learn. So I think that if there is something brought up and you have the experience, I'd like to hear it. You know, if something comes up about something, you know, I've just been kind of waiting to see if this comes into law and how it fits in before I ask any questions. But I feel like I've answered questions on the planning department or the land records office. I've had the experience. And I feel like we're here right now. We're in an information gathering to learn. And so I think if you can help with that, I don't think you need to not say anything. I think with your experience, you've been there a long time and do a great job. So I think if you can add to the conversation, that's all the better. And the more information we have to make the decisions, the better.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Chad is right. We sat together after a meeting and asked a lot of questions, and we're very candid with one another. So I encourage you all to do that. But I also want to say, while safety is number one when it comes to like police and fire, with this particular HB 547, I've gone to a number of, since my conversation with Chad, I've gone to a number of fire council meetings with the volunteers to learn as a study commissioner with my study commissioner hat on, because I wanted to learn about what the context is about the disagreements, if you will. And I'll tell you, and we will have the volunteers here to talk about this in an upcoming meeting, but what's been relayed to me time and time again from a number of volunteers from a number of the fire halls here in Butte is that it's not so much safety, but it's about power and control. So it's a very contentious issue, one that's gone on for decades, but I wanted to make sure I got that on the record tonight, because while safety is number one, the volunteers feel like this bill and the way it was processed through is all about consolidating power and control, and that is, you know, that's what they think is the number one thing from what I have been told in those meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Dolan. Ms. Casey?
I just have one question, and maybe, Matt, you might need to chew on this, but how does this bill in relation to our self-governing powers affect Butte-Silver Bow?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Casey, it provides the county to actually implement the ordinance that's in place, the ordinance that puts in place one fire director of fire services, just like we have one chief of police, or excuse me, one sheriff in charge of the police force. It also puts into effect the ability of the the volunteer fire districts to have budgets that are provided by the county. Right now, we're kind of in this weird limbo where the Attorney General's position specifically stated that when we consolidated, the volunteer fire departments still had control of their own budgets. And when you read that in conjunction with state law, in my opinion, that means they are required to go get to their own budgets as well. If House Bill 547 is passed, while it does consolidate power, it also provides the volunteers with their budgets that by our own ordinance we're required to give them. It is a cleanup bill. It's a bill that puts in place what the ordinance specifically stated, which this county passed, but also gives them their budgets and their ability to continue working and going forward. Outside of that, it doesn't do anything.
Mr. Thielen?
Yeah, Matt, hey, this is just a question. Some years ago, if I remember right, maybe you know, I don't know how long ago it was, I believe Northie Trethaway was the head of, or director of fire services, where the paid departments and the volunteers, they both had to go ask him, and his answer was the final say. Do you think that that would be a way to go if this does pass?
Commissioner Thielen, Madam Chair, I believe that that's going to be up to the director of that department. I think that's why we have directors, is when you have, you know, multiple managers under the directors that are part of all of that system, you know, they come to the one person in charge for the final answer. For instance, you know, Commissioner Dole and I have been in the Fire Study Commission meetings. There's an issue with what app all of the departments should have to use with regards to like who's on call, and there's a bunch of really good ones, but no one can agree on a single one. I mean, this is a simple, you know, this app will work for everybody. Here's why. Whether you have internet service or you don't, it works with whatever equipment the dispatch has in place, and all volunteers are going to use it. You know, half the volunteers want it, half the volunteers want a different one. I think what this bill particularly will do, if it is passed, is puts that authority, you know, in the power of one person to say, this is the app we're all going to use. And here's our budgets, guys, and this is where it's going to come from, and we're all going to be on the same page. And then that way we can say, you know, this volunteer group, this career group, these apparatuses, I'm learning all my fireman terms, are going to this fire because of this. And then and I think that's a lot of what it does, is it does consolidate power, but consolidating power is not always a bad thing, especially when you have these little issues that just need to be dealt with. But I also think that that's up to the Director of Fire Services. That's in the charter, it's in the ordinances, it puts that person in charge.
Wouldn't that be better if it was somebody that was neutral?
That is up for this commission to decide. Legally speaking, I have no say one way or another. I do have an opinion, but that's not for me in this. It's for when I get up there and make it.
Yeah, commissioners, I think this is, you know, definitely a meaty part that I'd like to dedicate a meeting to, you know, for us to really spend the whole meeting going through what needs to be in the charter to set up our career and volunteer departments for success, giving them, again, the boundaries with which to work within. Now, the relationships and building those relationships and making sure that people are feeling heard and that things are transparent and that we haven't just consolidated power, that all people are you know, working in a democratic society still. That's going to be up to them. We can provide the structure that we agree to that is going to meet the law, and also provide the best tools for them, their best constitution. But it's, again, up to them to implement that working relationship. And perhaps, you know, we would say we would like that Director of Fire Services to be independent of the two, but empower that Director of Fire Services to be able to make decisions like the radios. That was a big contentious problem. The app is a contentious problem. You know, where the budgets are, those things, you know, would hopefully be part of that. But if we are okay with it, I'd like that to be on our agenda after we hear from both our fire chief and then from our volunteer chiefs or somebody from their council. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I totally agree. But I just wanted to ask one more question. I know we're kind of getting into it, but I just want to find out what your opinion is with regard to the volunteer elected by the people trustees. What happens then? I mean, let's say this gets signed into law. What happens to those folks who are elected by the people and may have election terms that are not done until 2028? That was always a question of mine. Thank you.
And Commissioner Dolan, Madam Chair, the answer to that is it depends. I can provide a more detailed memorandum, but again, the law still allows for them to have their trustees. And again, the way it is, you know, currently set up, those trustees are there with regards to the budgetary authority. Now, if the bill is passed, where does that budgetary authority go? So the question then becomes is, does Butte-Silver Bow give them a budget and then the trustees figure out how to use that budget? Those are all questions that I've got as well that are still in a little bit of a gray area. And yes, they're elected officials, but I don't think, that specific statute gets rid of those trustees or those boards. I think what it's going to do is it's going to delineate a clear, this is what everybody is going to be doing, and we're going to have to work through that and actually probably get some AG's opinions on a couple of things too. But no, I don't think it gets rid of the trustees.
I'm not sure who was first.
I wanted to talk about something else.
Okay, Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is going to be my final comment because I know you want to get past this, but I would say that if you are doing your fact-finding, that it doesn't stop just after one session. This is a half a decade of problems. So if you have questions, please bring them back to the Director of Fire Services, who really hasn't heard from a lot of people who can answer your questions, rather than just stop. Because if we are going to make the best decisions for the community, it's not a one conversation and done. That is an opinion by me and others that this bill is not about safety. And I'm going to leave it at that. Because when I go to work, although I'm wearing the study commission hat right now, I am in charge of the entire county, 35,000 plus people. And again, some people's opinions, they are valid, but so is mine, and so are my directives and my assignments given to those individuals that show up on an emergency scene. And I could go on, but I will go ahead and relinquish that to Madam Chair. Thank you.
I guess what I'm envisioning is there's a series of meetings. We're hearing from many people, but one meeting for us to discuss and chew on what needs to be in the charter, and dedicating that whole meeting to that time, however long it is. And then if we need to, we'll continue on, right? Because it would be silly of us to say, hey, we've done everything we need to do and we don't have a consensus out of the commission. That wouldn't work, right? So if we have to sit for 4 meetings to get it resolved, then we will do that. I just want to clarify my intentions there. It wasn't meant to imply we're only going to listen one time and that's it. And I think it's really important, as you've brought up, to listen widely and make sure that we have good information coming to us. So I appreciate you bringing that up again. Ms. McCormick.
I probably should have brought this up earlier, but I was just wondering if we could have an update on the schedule for Council of Commission members to come before us.
We have an update on that, and I can give that now. We did finally reach out. We've connected with Chairman Morgan and then Vice Chair Thatcher, and so their advice was to just go ahead and work through their council secretary to schedule. I'd like to schedule a couple of nights that are dedicated to the commissioners. I'm looking into June because we want to give them enough lead time that they can be ready. However, I think that they would also like to have some questions that we may ask of them, although it would be rather open. Of course, our very directed questions of, if we were to reduce the number of commissioners, what is your opinion about that? And then I think the districts, where the district should be, would be a question that's valid and reasonable for them. And then the city manager question. But I leave it up to our question subcommittee, perhaps, to maybe think about what they may want to ask of our commissioners as they come forward to us. Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Then I would ask my fellow subcommittee members, Chad and Ben and I, if we could send each other. I don't want to take this on by myself. I want to hear what you have to say, and maybe we can talk or email what questions you think would be appropriate to ask the Council of Commissioners, and if anybody else had any ideas. But maybe could we do that through email and phone calls instead of taking up time in this meeting?
Mr. Silk?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we have all been kind of chomping at the bit, waiting to figure out when they were coming to formulate those questions. And I think you nailed it too, that I would even recommend that just as you said, all commissioners on this body email probably just the questions committee, otherwise we get into a meeting format, but so we can hear from all you on what questions you have. I have my ideas, but then we're not limited to myself, Mr. Thielen, Ms. McCormick, and I believe Mr. Steppen as well, too, so we can hear from all of you that I imagine are going to have much better questions than myself, so thank you.
All right, any more discussion on Council of Commissioners? All right, excellent. So that concludes new business. We don't have a public hearing tonight.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I know the night's getting late, but if we don't discuss it tonight, I'd like to discuss moving the public comment on any item not on the agenda up. I kind of agree with Mr. Banderob. I don't think I'd want to sit here for now on to 3 hours to wait to make a public comment. And we might hear public comments that we might want to add to agenda items. So I would just, if we don't discuss it tonight, if we add it for discussion next time, because I do know it's getting late, but.
What's the will of the group? I'm ready to entertain that discussion tonight if we are ready for it. I can also push it to next week and give us time to ruminate and think about it. Ms. McCormick?
I would like to make a motion that we have, at the beginning of the meeting, public comment on any item on the agenda or public comment on anything not on the agenda.
Second.
All right, so discussion on the motion. Ms. Shaw?
We can make it really simple and just say public comment, period. I mean, it doesn't have to say before or after, related or not related, just public comment.
Do we want to limit them to their time? We don't want to give them 3 or 4 hours.
No.
Yeah.
So by law, we cannot put a limit. Don't tell GP I said that. But it's a courtesy. We asked if you would kindly, I always say, would you kindly limit your comments to 3 minutes? You know, but you literally cannot, you can't demand that. It's too bad, but I guess
Mr.
it's not
Enright?
law.
Yes, the only thing I have to say is please keep the language in with regards to any item on the agenda or not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the study commission. Because it is this specific commission, they can make the comment on anything that's within your jurisdiction. That's why we have all the other commissions, and they can go talk about those ones at their time.
Ms. Khan?
I would just like to point out that our agenda and the language of the agenda came right out of the MSU thing, and we've already discussed it, and it came out on there. We can move it around however we want, but the language came right out of the law center, just to remind you.
Yeah, fair point. We were following a boilerplate agenda that was given to us, and our intention is to be hearing from our public. So I believe the motion might need an amendment to say public comment on anything not on the agenda or on the agenda. What was the language, Mr. Enruth? I apologize.
Specifically, I believe that the sections say public comment. I would keep them 2 separate sections. I would have section 4, public comment on any item on the agenda, and then section 5, public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission. That way you have a clear agenda and clear minutes are kept.
Thank you. So Ms. McCormick, can you amend your motion, please?
Yes, I would like to amend the motion so that we have one item, item 4, be public comment on any item on the agenda, and then have the next following item be public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Banderob. All right, is there anything else in our new business? All right, and no public hearing tonight and no scheduled matters. Public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission.
Oops, wrong piece of paper. Sorry about that. Auditor Banner of 2601 Grand Avenue. Thank you. I was told I should apologize for the unloading 13 years of frustration in that long, boring presentation at the last meeting. So I apologize. Now, further to my previous comments, the man said to think on it before I answered. I had to sleep on it to let the synapses connect before I could make an answer. I was originally thinking that the commissioners would be doing what they are doing now, and I just could not see what they would be doing all day sitting in the office while their constituents are at work. After sleeping on it, if we want to get the job done the way it should be done, I have to agree with the man. Part-time commissioners just does not work. As some of you may know, I lived in Peru for a few years while working for a evaporated milk company. The Incas organized their system by groups of 10. Each group of 10 had a coordinator. Each group of 10 coordinators had a coordinator, and so on up the ladder. The Vikings that settled Iceland had no organized government, but they had regional things where the people gathered together 4 or 5 times a year, and a national thing at an annual assembly. Each thing had its own selected leading guru and reciter of the code of conduct. When I thought it through after sleeping on it, you consolidate into 6 districts by combining 2 existing districts to make 1. There would probably be close to 10 definable neighborhoods with common interest and common concerns that would be large enough to be self-sustainable in each of the districts. Then specify in the charter that the district commissioners do 2 jobs. First, commissioner as designated under the powers and duties in the current Butte-Silver charter. But second, function as neighborhood community improvement coordinators with specific duties and responsibilities designated in the charter. Getting old, you know. Gotta read it. Then there would be more than enough work to justify 6 full-time commissioners, plus a full-time council chair with specific commissioner powers and duties and neighborhood community improvement responsibilities. That's probably my 3 minutes. So you can, if you limit us to 3 minutes, then we won't take 3 hours. I've got about a couple more minutes. Is that all right? Thank you. As outlined in my previous amendment to the charter, presentations, these powers and duties, responsibilities might be specified in the charter. But first you have to ask that lawyer man, are duties and responsibilities obligated, or are they at the will of the commissioners? Because that's what I've been fighting for 13 years. The council chair shall perform the duties of the council chair, shall be responsible for coordinating the functions of the council, shall be responsible for the council's interactions with the Butte-Silver CEO or city manager or whatever you want to call him. That the council chair shall also be responsible for coordinating council's interactions with the public, including but not limited to calling for and chairing community councils and public listening sessions, coordinating with the respective district commissioner, formation and functioning of neighborhood community improvement coalitions and alliances. As I said last time, the public don't like to be called councils. They want to do it the Viking way. That the district commissioners shall perform the duties, powers and duties as currently designated in the charter. And then that the district commissioners shall be responsible for, but not limited to, the council's interaction with the public in his or her neighborhoods and district, coordinating and formation and functioning of neighborhood community coalitions and alliances, coordinating neighborhood and district public listening sessions, representing to the county council and electing a representative to the county council of community council at an annual combined assembly and celebration of harmony in our neighborhood communities in the district. Here again, I thank you for listening. I'll send this to you in an email. I did send you a previous email. I hope that it was addressed to the council or to the commission. I don't see it on the agenda, but I was late, so that was acceptable. I would suggest that you do put on your website that any communications addressed to the council be there by, Friday noon or whenever is necessary. Here again, I thank you for your time, your efforts, and the due diligence that you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderrob. Much appreciated. Any other conversation? Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make mention, it was not in the agenda, but May 21st, party line, that's still on for 3 of us. And I have that on my calendar. I forget who the other 2 are, but I know I'm joining. June. Oh, it's June, not May 21st. It's June 21st. June 18th. Why did I say May 21st? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for that. So it's June 18th. 3. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And it was correct in our minutes too, Ms. Dolan, if you wanted to look back. Yes. All right. So our announcements, meetings held every Monday at 5 p.m. except on federal holidays. So May 26th, there will be no meeting of this commission since that will be a federal holiday, not just a Butte one. And I would take a motion to adjourn, please. Have it on both sides. So we'll have Mr. Thielen with the motion and the second by Shaw. All those in favor? Thank you, folks. I appreciate your time tonight, and I'll see you next week.